My name is Cassidy. They say that blood is thicker than water, but they forget that you can drown in both. At 19, I stood in the lobby of the registrar's office, my hands shaking so hard the paper in my grip sounded like dry leaves in a storm. I had my schedule printed: Architecture 101, Calculus, Structural Design. I had my dorm key. I had my dreams packed into 3 cardboard boxes in the trunk of a beat-up sedan. All I needed was for the tuition payment to clear. "I'm sorry, Cassidy," the clerk said, her voice filtered through a thick pane of glass. "The account is empty. The wire transfer was reversed 3 days ago." My heart didn't just skip a beat, it felt like it hit a wall. "That's impossible," I whispered. "That was my college fund. My grandmother started that when I was born. My parents have been adding to it for 18 years. There's $80,000 in there." The clerk looked at me with a pity that felt like a slap. "The balance is 0, honey. It was withdrawn by the primary account holders, Arthur and Eleanor Vance." I didn't cry then. I didn't have the air in my lungs to produce tears. I walked out of that office, past the students laughing and meeting their roommates, and drove 3 hours back to the house I used to call home. A house that smelled of jasmine and lies. When I walked through the front door, the house was celebratory. I heard the clink of crystal from the dining room. I heard my brother, Julian's, loud, arrogant laugh. Julian was 21, the sun around which my parents orbited. I was just a moon, useful for reflecting their light, but expected to stay in the dark. I walked into the dining room. There was a bottle of vintage champagne on the table. My father, Arthur, was beaming, his arm around Julian's shoulders. My mother, Eleanor, was looking at a glossy brochure for something called Vance Virtuality. "There she is!" my father shouted, his voice booming. "The college girl! Come, have a glass. We're celebrating a pivot in the family legacy." I didn't take a glass. I stood at the head of the table, my shadow stretching over their feast. "Where is my tuition money, Dad?" The room went silent. The bubbles in the champagne hissed. My mother didn't look up from the brochure. "Cassidy, don't be dramatic," she said softly. "We've had a family emergency, a business opportunity that couldn't wait." "A business opportunity?" I choked out. "That was my grandmother's money. That was my 4 years of school." Julian leaned back in his chair, picking at a piece of expensive cheese. "It's an investment, Cass. I'm launching a crypto-integrated luxury concierge service. It's the future. In 2 years, that 80,000 will be 8 million. I'll buy you a whole university then." "You're a dropout, Julian," I screamed. "You failed 3 businesses in 4 years. You burned through your own fund, and now you've stolen mine?" My father's face turned a dangerous shade of red. He slammed his hand on the table. "Stolen? You live under my roof. You eat my food. That money belongs to this family, and right now, this family needs to support the person with the most potential. Julian has a vision. You were just going to be a mid-level architect. You're smart, Cassidy. You're resourceful. You can get a loan. You can work a job. Julian needs the capital now." "You're choosing him again," I said, the realization settling into my bones like ice. "We are choosing the family's future," my mother said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were as cold as the marble countertops.
Don't be selfish. You've always been the steady one. You don't need a head start like Julian does. You'll figure it out. Now sit down and be happy for your brother." I looked at Julian. He was smiling. It was the smile of a boy who had never been told no a day in his life. "I'm leaving," I said. "Fine," my father barked. "Go to your room." "No," I said, pulling the dorm key from my pocket and throwing it on the table. It landed in Julian's champagne glass with a sharp clink. I walked out. I didn't pack. I just took my car, my $200 in tips from my summer job, and the fury burning in my chest. As I drove down the driveway, I saw them through the window, already back to their toast. They didn't even watch me go.
The next 3 years were a blur of caffeine, cold air, and the smell of industrial grease. I didn't go to my dream school. I went to a community college at night while working 10-hour shifts at a structural steel yard during the day. I slept in a studio apartment where the heater rattled like a dying ghost, and the only furniture was a mattress on the floor and a drafting table I'd found in a dumpster. I learned the language of steel. I learned how to calculate the load-bearing weight of a skyscraper and the breaking point of a human soul. While Julian was posting photos of private jets and networking events in Miami, all funded by my stolen tuition, I was earning my degree in sweat. I stopped answering their calls after the first month. The messages were always the same. "Cassidy, your mother is upset you didn't call for her birthday." "Cassidy, Julian needs a temporary loan to cover a licensing fee. We know you're working." "Cassidy, don't be bitter. It's unbecoming." I blocked them all. I changed my name, not legally, but professionally. I became C. Vance, the forensic auditor and structural consultant. I made it my mission to understand money as well as I understood buildings. I wanted to know how things were built, and more importantly, how they fell apart. By the time I was 24, I had landed a job at a high-stakes firm that specialized in distressed assets. I was the person banks called when a developer went bust, and they needed to know what the remains were worth. I became a vulture in a designer's suit, and I was very, very good at it. It was a Tuesday in November when I saw the name on my desk. Asset Portfolio, 1422 Oak Crest Drive. My heart stopped. Oak Crest Drive? The house with the jasmine? The house with the mahogany table? I pulled the file. It was a disaster. My father had put the house up as collateral for Julian's virtuality venture. The crypto market had crashed, Julian's concierge service had been hit with 3 different lawsuits for fraud, and my father had been creatively moving funds from his own firm to cover the losses. It was a house of cards, and the wind had finally started to blow. The bank was moving to foreclose. They needed a structural and financial valuation before it went to the courthouse steps. I could have recused myself. I should have, but I felt a pull in my gut that I couldn't ignore. I wanted to see the ruins. I drove to the house the following Friday. I wore a charcoal gray suit and sunglasses that cost more than my first car. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, looking at the peeling paint on the shutters. The jasmine was dead. The lawn was a graveyard of brown weeds. I walked up and rang the bell. My mother opened the door. She was wearing a bathrobe at 2 in the afternoon. Her hair was unwashed, and she held a glass of dark liquid that didn't look like tea. "We aren't leaving!" she screamed before she even saw my face. "The lawyers said we have 30 days!" "Hello, Eleanor," I said, removing my glasses. She froze. The glass in her hand trembled. "Cassidy?" "I'm here on behalf of the creditors," I said.
my voice as flat as a dial tone. "I need to inspect the property." She stumbled back, allowing me to enter. The house smelled of stale air and desperation. Piles of mail, red-stamped and urgent, cluttered the foyer. My father came out of the kitchen, looking aged and broken. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and he looked like a man who hadn't slept in a year. "Cassidy?" he whispered. You're with the bank?" "I'm the auditor," I said. I pulled out my tablet and started taking photos of the cracks in the ceiling. "It looks like you've neglected the foundation. That's going to hurt the auction price." "Auction?" my mother cried. "Cassidy, you have to do something. You're successful now. We've seen the news. You're a partner at that firm. Talk to them. Tell them we need more time. Tell them Julian is just about to close a new deal." "Julian is in a hotel in the Caymans trying to avoid a subpoena. I know where the money went. I followed the trail. He didn't just spend my college fund. He spent your retirement. He spent the equity in this house. He spent money that didn't even exist." My father stepped forward, his eyes red. "He's your brother. He had a bad run. We're a family, Cassidy. We did what we had to do to survive." "No," I said, stepping into the dining room. The mahogany table was still there, but it was covered in legal documents and empty takeout containers. "You did what you had to do to feed Julian's ego. You sacrificed me to build a monument to his failure. And now the monument is falling." I spent 2 hours in that house. I checked every room. I looked at my old bedroom, which had been turned into a storage unit for Julian's failed tech equipment, boxes of unbranded headsets and useless servers. As I walked to the door, my father grabbed my arm. His grip was weak. "Help us, Cass, please. We have nowhere to go." I looked at his hand, then at his face. "I'm an auditor, Dad. I only see what I find, and what I see is a total loss." The auction was held in a sterile room at the county courthouse. My parents weren't there. They couldn't bear to watch. There were 4 other bidders, investors looking to flip the property. They saw a fixer-upper in a good zip code. I saw a debt that needed to be collected. The bidding started at $400,000. $450, a man in a polo shirt said. $500, I said, not looking at him. $510, $600. The room went quiet. $600,000 was more than the house was worth in its current state. The man in the polo shirt shook his head. Going once, going twice, sold to the woman in the gray suit. I signed the papers. I wired the money I had earned from bonuses, from smart investments, and from years of living on nothing. I owned 1422 Oakcrest Drive. I didn't move in. I didn't change the locks. Not yet. I waited for the day the eviction notice was set to expire. The day was gray and drizzling, a mirror of the night I had left 8 years ago. I pulled into the driveway. A moving truck was parked there, but it was small. My parents didn't have much left to move. Most of the furniture had been seized or sold. They were standing on the porch, holding a few boxes. Julian was nowhere to be found. I later found out he'd fled to a friend's basement, leaving his parents to deal with the rubble. My mother saw my car and burst into tears. "The new owner is coming today, Arthur. We're going to be on the street. I can't believe it. I can't believe it's over." I stepped out of the car. I walked up the driveway, my heels clicking on the pavement like a countdown. "You're late," I said. My father looked at me, confused. "Cassidy? What are you doing here? Did you talk to the new owner? Can we stay for a week? Just a week to find a rental?" I pulled a folder from my bag. I didn't say a word. I handed it to him. He opened it. His eyes moved across the deed, then the bill of sale, then the name of the LLC I had formed to purchase the property. GC Debt Holdings. You? He whispered. You bought it? I bought it. Every cracked tile, every dead jasmine vine. My mother let out a cry of joy. She dropped her box and tried to hug me. Oh, Cassidy, you saved us. I knew you wouldn't let us go. I knew you'd come through for your family. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. The air between us felt like a live wire. I didn't save you, I said. I made an investment. I pulled out a second document, a lease agreement. What's this? Alistair asked, his brow furrowing. Your new reality, I said. You're not living here for free. You're not my parents today. You're my tenants. This is a standard lease agreement for a property of this size in this neighborhood. My father looked at the number at the bottom of the page. His face went white. 4,000 a month? Cassidy, that's market rate. We don't have that kind of money. My firm is in receivership. We're living on Social Security and whatever I can consult for. Then I suggest you get a roommate, or perhaps Julian can find a job. I hear the grocery store is hiring night managers. You're charging us rent in our own home? After we raised us, after everything we gave you? You gave my future to Julian, I reminded her. You told me I was resourceful. You told me I could figure it out. Well, I did. I figured out how to buy the roof over your head, and now you're going to pay me for the privilege of staying under it. This is cold, Cassidy, Alistair said, his voice shaking. This is pure spite. No, I said, leaning in until I was inches from his face. Spite would be letting you rot on the sidewalk. This is business. This is the vision you were so fond of. I'm the landlord now, and I have very strict rules about late payments.
The next 6 months were a slow-motion car crash for them. They stayed. They had no other choice. My father took a job as an entry-level clerk at a firm where he used to be a peer. My mother started working at a boutique, ironically selling clothes she used to buy without looking at the price tag. Every first of the month at 8 a.m., I would receive a notification on my phone. Rent paid. Sometimes it was short by a few $100s. I would send a formal notice. No phone calls, no emotional appeals. Just a letter on my firm's letterhead. Balance due in 48 hours or eviction proceedings will begin. They would scramble, they would call, I wouldn't answer. The money would eventually appear. One night, I went to the house for an inspection. It was part of the lease. I wanted to ensure the property was being maintained. The house was quiet. The grand furniture was gone, replaced by cheap, flat-pack tables. The mahogany dining table had been sold to pay for the second month's rent. In its place was a small, plastic folding table. My mother was sitting there, eating a bowl of canned soup. She looked at me, and for the first time, she didn't look angry. She looked defeated. Was it worth it, Cassidy? Watching us struggle like this, does it make you feel powerful? I walked through the kitchen, checking for leaks. It makes me feel even, I said. I spent years eating canned soup while Julian was at 5-star resorts on my tuition money. I spent years wondering if I'd have a roof over my head. I'm just giving you the experience you said would make me resourceful." "We were wrong," she whispered. "We know that now. Julian, he doesn't even call. He only asks for money. He's gone, Cassidy. We lost him." "You didn't lose him," I said, turning to her. "You created him. You fed the monster until it ate everything, and then you were surprised when it was still hungry." I walked to the door. As I reached for the handle, my father came in from work. He looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. "The heater is making a noise," he said, not even looking at me as his daughter, but as his landlord. "Can you have someone look at it? I'll send a repairman on Monday. But remember, if the damage is due to negligence, the cost comes out of your security deposit." He just nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't yell. The fire in him was gone. A year later, Julian returned. He didn't return with an apology or a plan. He returned because he was being hunted by creditors and had nowhere else to hide. I found out because I checked the security cameras I'd installed on the property. I saw his flashy, rented car in the driveway. I saw him walking through the front door like he still owned the place. I was there in 20 minutes. I didn't knock. I used my key. They were in the living room. Julian was sitting on the sofa, my sofa, with his feet on the coffee table. He was telling them about a new opportunity in green energy. He just needed $5,000 to get the paperwork started. "You have $5,000, don't you, Dad?" Julian asked, his voice still carrying that nauseating confidence. "Cassidy is the one who bought the house, right? If she can afford that, she can afford to help her brother." "Get your feet off the table," I said. The three of them jumped. Julian sneered at me. "Well, if it isn't the Ice Queen. Nice suit, Cass. Business must be good. Listen, I'm in a bit of a bind." "You're in a bind," I said, walking toward him. "I'm in a position of ownership, and you are a guest in a rental property with a strict no unauthorized occupants policy." "Oh, come on," Julian laughed. "It's me. It's Julian. Tell her, Mom. Tell her I'm staying here for a while." My mother looked at me, then at Julian. She looked at the small, cramped apartment-style life she was now living. She looked at the gray hair on my father's head and the way his hands shook as he held his cheap coffee mug. She stood up. She walked over to Julian. "You need to leave," she said. Julian's smile faltered. "What?" "You heard her," my father said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. "We don't have $5,000, Julian. We don't even have $500. We are paying rent to your sister. We are working 2 jobs to stay in a house we used to own because of you." "You're taking her side?" Julian shouted. "She's treating you like servants." "She's treating us like adults, something we never did for you. Now get out before I call the police for trespassing." Julian looked at me, his eyes full of venom. "You did this. You turned them against me." "No," I said. "The truth turned them against you. I just provided the venue." Julian grabbed his bag and stormed out. We watched from the window as his car sped away, kicking up gravel from the driveway I had yet to repair. The room was silent for a long time. "He's not coming back, is he?" my mother asked. "No," I said. "And neither is your money." I looked at the two of them. I had spent 8 years wanting to destroy them. I had spent 8 years imagining this moment, the moment they realized that their golden boy was lead and I was the one who had survived. But as I looked at them, I didn't feel the rush of victory I expected. I just felt tired. "The lease is up for renewal next month." My father looked down on the floor. "We can't keep this up, Cassidy. We're tired.
We'll find a smaller place, a studio, somewhere we can actually afford. I looked around the house of my childhood, the house of my betrayal. I'm selling the house, I said. They both looked up, startled. I've received an offer from a developer. They want to tear it down and build 3 modern townhomes. The profit will be significant. Tear it down? My mother whispered. But our memories. My memories are an empty bank account and a dinner where you told me I didn't matter. I'd rather have the townhomes. I pulled out one final envelope. I placed it on the table. What's this? Alistair asked. The profit from the sale, minus my initial investment, the taxes, and the $80,000 you took from me, plus 8 years of interest. That's what's left. He opened the envelope. There was a check for $50,000. Not enough to buy a mansion, not enough to retire, but enough to live with a little dignity in a small apartment somewhere far away from here. Why? My mother asked, tears streaming down her face. Because I'm not Julian. I don't take things that don't belong to me, and I don't want to be the landlord of your misery anymore. I'm done with this family debt. It's paid in full. I walked out of the house for the last time. I didn't look back at the dead jasmine or the peeling paint. I didn't look back at the parents who had failed me or the brother who had robbed me. I drove away, and for the first time in 8 years, I didn't feel the weight of Oakcrest Drive in my rearview mirror. 3 months later, the house was gone. I stood across the street and watched the wrecking ball swing through the dining room. I watched the mahogany-colored walls crumble into dust. People say revenge is a dish best served cold, but they're wrong. Revenge is a house you build yourself, with foundations so strong that no one can ever take the floor out from under you again. I'm Cassidy. I'm an architect, and I finally know how to build something that lasts. The golden child is gone, the parents are silent, and the family mistake is the only one left standing. If your family sold your future for a lie, would you burn the bridge, or would you buy it just to watch them cross it on your terms? I know my answer. What's yours?
My name is Ember. For 10 years, I've existed as a ghost in my own family's history. I'm 26 now. I own a townhouse in the city. I have a career in high-stakes forensic accounting, and my bank account is a fortress. But when I close my eyes, I'm still 16, standing on a curb in a soaked hoodie, watching the taillights of my father's SUV disappear into the rain. People talk about the black sheep. I wasn't a black sheep. I was a scapegoat. In my family, my brother, Julian, was the sun, and I was the shadow that took the blame whenever he got burned. The night they threw me out wasn't about a big blow-up. It was a cold, calculated disposal. Julian had crashed the family car while drunk. I was the one who was told to sit in the driver's seat before the police arrived. When I refused, when I finally said no, my father didn't scream. He just opened the front door and threw my duffel bag into the mud. "You've always been a parasite, Ember," he said. His voice was as flat as a grave. "If you won't protect this family, you aren't part of it." My mother stood behind him, adjusting her pearl necklace. She didn't look at me. She looked at the smudge on the floor I'd left with my shoes. "It's for the best, Victor," she whispered. She was always a difficult child. They closed the door. I heard the deadbolt slide home. That sound, that clack, became the heartbeat of my life for the next decade.
The first year was a blur of bus stations and don't ask, don't tell shelters. I learned the hard way that the world doesn't care if you're a straight-A student or a girl with a broken heart. The world only cares if you can pay for the space you occupy. I worked 3 jobs: I scrubbed floors in a 24-hour gym at 4 a.m., waitressed at a Greasy Spoon at noon, and studied for my GED in the break room of a warehouse at night. I lived on coffee and the sheer burning spite that kept my blood warm. I remember one night, I was 19, living in a basement apartment with a leak in the ceiling. I had a fever of 103. I was shaking so hard I couldn't hold a glass of water. I reached for my phone to call my mother. I wanted to hear her voice. I wanted her to tell me she'd come get me. I stared at the screen for an hour. Then I remembered the clack of the deadbolt. I put the phone down. I survived that fever alone, and in that moment I realized that Ember, the girl who wanted a mother, was dead. The woman who replaced her didn't need anyone. She just needed a plan. 10 years to the day, I was sitting in my office overlooking the skyline when my phone vibrated. An unknown number from my hometown area code. Usually I'd ignore it, but something, that old dormant instinct of a scapegoat, made me pick up. Ember? The voice was thin, brittle. It was Julian. The sun sounded like he was eclipsed. "What do you want, Julian?" I asked. No emotion, just the cold precision of a woman who tracks missing millions for a living. "I'm sick, Em. It's bad. Polycystic kidney disease. Both are failing. I've been on dialysis for 18 months. He choked back a sob. It sounded practiced. "Mom and Dad, they aren't matches. None of the cousins are. The doctor said siblings are the best hope." I felt a phantom chill like rain hitting my skin. "And you thought of me after 10 years of silence? After Dad told the neighbors I ran away with a cult? After Mom blocked my number?" "We were wrong," he cried. "They're desperate, Ember. He's not the man he was. He's broken. Please, just come to the hospital. Just get tested. We'll pay for everything." I looked at the framed photo on my desk. It wasn't a family. It was of the first car I bought myself, a beat-up sedan that represented my freedom. "I'll be there on Friday, but not for you. I want to see the look on his face." The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and false hope. My parents were sitting in the corner. My father, Victor, looked diminished. His expensive suit was ill-fitting and his hands shook as he held a plastic cup of water. My mother, Celine, was clutching her prayer beads, her face a mask of calculated grief. When I walked in, Celine gasped. She stood up, reaching out as if to hug me. I stepped back, my heels clicking sharply on the linoleum. "Ember," she breathed, "you look so successful. We always knew you'd do well." "You knew I'd do well while I was sleeping in a shelter?" I asked. Victor looked up. There was no apology in his eyes, only a desperate predatory hunger. He saw me as a biological spare part. "Julian is dying, Ember. The doctors say he has months. You're our only chance to save the family name." "The family name," I repeated. "Always the name, never the girl." "We'll make it up to you," he promised, his voice cracking. "Everything we have, we'll put you back in the will. We'll tell everyone the truth." "I don't care about your will, Victor. I have my own money," I said. "I'll do the test, but don't mistake my presence for forgiveness." The nurse called my name. I walked into the back, feeling their eyes on my back like heat lamps. I let them draw the blood. I let them take the swabs. I knew the results before they did. In our family, Julian and I were identical in everything but character. I knew I was a match. 3 days later, the call came.
A perfect match. A medical miracle, the coordinator called it. I invited my parents and Julian, who was in a wheelchair now, to my home to discuss the arrangements. They arrived at my townhouse, eyes wide as they took in the high ceilings, the modern art, and the undeniable proof that I had thrived in the vacuum they left behind. We sat in my dining room. Julian looked gray, his skin clinging to his bones. Part of me, the old Ember, felt a pang of pity. But then I looked at my father, who was already talking to a lawyer on his phone about scheduling the procedure. "We've talked to the surgeon at the university hospital." Victor snapped his phone shut. "Celine has already hired a private nurse for your recovery at our house." "I'm not recovering at your house," I said quietly. "Ember, honey, you'll be weak," Celine said, her voice dripping with that fake saccharin poison. "Let us take care of you, like we should have all those years." "You had 16 years to take care of me." I pulled a thick manila envelope from under the table and slid it across the wood. "What's this?" Julian asked, his voice a rasp. "Consent forms?" "No," I said. "It's the bill." Victor opened the envelope. He pulled out a spreadsheet. I watched his eyes scan the lines. "What is this?" he hissed. "Emotional trauma, $500,000? Lost educational opportunities, $250,000? Housing and subsistence, ages 16 to 21, $150,000? Medical expenses incurred alone, $75,000? He looked up, his face reddening. "Is this a joke? You're charging us for being your parents?" "No," I said, leaning forward. "I'm charging you for failing to be my parents. I did a forensic audit of the last 10 years of my life. I calculated the cost of every night I spent hungry, every hour of therapy I needed to stop shaking when someone raised their voice, and the interest on the trauma you gifted me." Celine was staring at the bottom line. $2 million? She whispered. "Ember, we don't have that kind of liquid cash. The business has been struggling with Julian's medical bills." "Then sell the house," I said. "Sell the summer cottage. Sell the SUV Julian crashed. You told me I was a parasite. You told me I was an unplanned expense. Well, the bill has come due. A kidney is an elective donation, and my price is $2 million. Paid into a trust for foster youth, plus a signed, notarized confession of what you did to me, published in the local paper." "This is blackmail!" Victor roared, slamming his fist on my table. "No," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "This is a business transaction. You want a piece of me? You pay for the pieces you already broke." The room went silent. Julian started to cough, a wet, rattling sound that filled the space. Dad, please, I don't want to die," Julian wheezed, grabbing Victor's arm. "Dad, please." Victor looked at Julian, then at me. I saw the struggle in his eyes. He hated me. He hated that I had the power, but he loved the son. He loved his legacy. "You're a monster," Celine whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm the monster you built. I learned from the best. I learned that family is a currency. I'm just using the exchange rate you set." I stood up. "You have 48 hours. If the money isn't in the trust and the confession isn't at the printer, I'm changing my number and moving to London. Julian can wait on the National Registry like everyone else. I hear the wait time is 5 to 7 years. Does he have that long?" I didn't wait for an answer. I showed them to the door. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of frantic calls and legal threats.
Victor's lawyer called mine, screaming about coercion. My lawyer simply sent back a copy of the video I'd recorded, the one of my parents admitting they'd thrown me out at 16. In a city like ours, reputation is everything. Victor knew that if I went public with the video, he'd lose the few clients he had left. On Sunday morning, I opened the local newspaper. There, on page 4, was a public notice, a public apology to our daughter, Ember. It detailed the night they threw me out. It admitted Julian's accident was his own fault. It stated in black and white that they had failed as parents and had spent a decade slandering an innocent child. The money hit the trust an hour later, $2 million. I went to the hospital on Tuesday morning. I saw Julian before the surgery. He looked at me with something that might have been gratitude, or maybe it was just fear. "You got what you wanted," he said. "I got what I was owed," I corrected. "There's a difference." The anesthesia felt like a cold wave pulling me under. When I woke up, the pain in my side was a sharp, searing reminder of what I'd given up. I was in a private recovery room. My parents weren't there. I'd banned them from the floor. The surgeon came in a few hours later. "The transplant was a success, Ember. Your brother's body accepted the organ immediately. He's stable." "Good," I said. "Your parents are downstairs," the surgeon added hesitantly. "They're asking to see you. Your mother is quite distraught." "Tell them the contract is complete," I said, closing my eyes. "There is no reason for us to ever speak again." It's been 6 months. Julian is healthy. He sends me emails sometimes full of "we miss you" and "mom's in therapy." I don't reply. I don't hate them anymore. That would require feeling something, and I am empty of them. My parents had to downsize. They live in a small condo now. Their social standing never recovered from the public confession. People look at them differently now. They aren't the pillars of the community anymore. They're the people who threw their daughter into the rain and had to buy her back. I went to the foster youth center last week, the one funded by the $2 million. I met a girl there. She was 16. She'd been kicked out because she didn't fit her parents' image. I sat with her. I showed her my scar. "They told me I was a mistake," she whispered to me, her eyes red. "They told me the same thing," I said. "But look at me. I'm the most expensive mistake they ever made." I walked out of the center and into the city air. It wasn't raining. The sun was out, and for the first time in 10 years, the sound of that deadbolt sliding home was gone. I am Ember. I am a match for no one but myself. And finally, the bill is settled. So I have to ask you, the person listening to this, if your family broke you into pieces and years later they came to you needing one of those pieces to survive, what would you do? Would you give it for free? Would you walk away? Or would you make them pay for every second they let you bleed? Think about it, because sometimes the only way to heal a wound is to make sure the person who gave it to you feels the scar.
My name is Nancy. I'm 25 now, but in my memory, I'm perpetually 17, standing at the edge of a high-gloss mahogany table that felt more like an altar for my own sacrifice. It was the night of the Platinum Achievement Gala. My father's architectural firm had just landed a landmark contract, and my younger brother, Leo, had been named valedictorian of his elite private academy. The house was a temple of glass and steel in the hills of Aspen, filled with people who smelled like expensive tobacco and aged scotch. I had just been accepted into a regional design school with a small grant, nothing compared to Leo's Ivy League trajectory, so my acceptance letter sat crumpled in the pocket of my thrifted dress, a secret I knew better than to share. I was the invisible gears in their clockwork life. My job was to ensure the hors d'oeuvres never ran dry and the guests' coats were perfectly catalogued. My mother, Vivian, moved through the crowd like a polished diamond, beautiful, hard, and capable of cutting anyone who got too close. She wasn't intoxicated yet, but her smile had that razor-edged sharpness I'd learned to fear. My father, Alistair, was performing the role of the great patriarch, laughing with a boom that didn't reach his eyes, checking his watch as if counting the minutes until he could stop pretending to like his friends. Halfway through the main course, Vivian clinked her baccarat crystal. The room settled into an expectant hush. People pulled out their phones, expecting a toast to the family's brilliance. She stood behind my chair, her hands resting on my shoulders. Her rings felt cold against my skin, like lead weights.
I have to introduce the most unique part of our portfolio, she announced, her voice honeyed and mocking. The guests leaned in. Our daughter, Nancy. She paused, letting the silence stretch until it felt uncomfortable. The one project we couldn't quite bring to code, our beautiful, expensive little error. The room didn't gasp, they laughed, a slow, rolling tide of polite, upper-class chuckles that felt like being pelted with stones. My father pointed his wineglass at me and added, "She's the 1% of the budget we wish we'd diverted to the landscaping." More laughter. A flash went off in my face as a family friend captured my burning cheeks for a social media story. I stared at the centerpiece, a cluster of white orchids, and realized this wasn't a joke. It was a manifesto. They had been building this narrative for years, brick by brick. Every unplanned surprise comment and every "we didn't expect to be parents again" remark had been leading to this public branding. I pushed my chair back. The screech of wood against the stone floor was the only protest I had. "Oh, sit down, Nancy. Don't be a martyr," Vivian whispered, her grip tightening until her nails dug in. "It's all in good fun. We love you, in our way." "In your way?" I repeated. My voice was steady, a strange contrast to the roaring in my ears. I walked out. I didn't run. I went upstairs, to the room that had always felt like a guest suite I was overstaying in. I packed a canvas bag with 3 changes of clothes, my heavy-duty charcoal pencils, and the $42 I'd saved from selling sketches to kids at school. I didn't slam the door. I walked back down the stairs just as the dessert was being served. I walked to the head of the table, placed my house key on Alistair's bread plate, and looked him in the eye. "You're going to regret making me the punchline," I said. My mother rolled her eyes. "Where will you go, Nancy? You don't even have a coat." "Away from here, which means I'm already doing better than you." I stepped out into the freezing Aspen night with a backpack and a label I refused to wear for one more second. I didn't know where the bus was going, only that it was leaving. 8 years later, when they were standing on my doorstep in the rain, broken and gray-faced, I remembered every single second of that walk into the dark, and I made sure they remembered it too. The bus station smelled of stale popcorn and diesel, but it felt like the first breath of oxygen I'd ever taken.
I bought a ticket for the furthest destination my $42 and a bit of loose change could buy. Seattle, a city of rain and steel. On the overnight ride, my phone screamed with notifications. Mom, stop this tantrum, it's embarrassing. Dad, don't do something stupid, we have brunch at the club tomorrow. Leo, they were just joking, Nancy. Come back so I can get my car keys. Not one person asked if I was warm. Not one person asked if I was safe. I turned the phone off and dropped it into a trash can at a rest stop in Idaho. I wasn't their error anymore. I was a ghost. When I landed in Seattle, the city swallowed me whole. I lived in a youth hostel for 48 hours before my money ran out. I spent the third night in a 24-hour laundromat, clutching my bag and sketching the people who came in to dry their lives on high heat. The next morning, I walked until my feet bled. I found a metalworking shop on the edge of the industrial district called the Foundry. It was a grimy, loud, honest place. A woman with grease-stained overalls and a welding mask pushed up on her forehead was moving sheets of steel. "You hirin'?" I asked. She looked me over, the expensive but dirty Aspen clothes, the hollowed-out look in my eyes. "You look like you've never touched a wrench in your life." "I learn fast," I said, "and I have nowhere else to go. I'll sweep the floors, I'll haul the scrap, just give me a corner to sleep in." She grunted. "I'm Sarah. We don't have a corner to sleep in, but we have a night shift that needs a watcher. Pay is minimum, and you'll smell like burnt iron for the rest of your life. Deal?" Deal. The Foundry became my home. I swept iron filings until my lungs ached. I watched the welders, the fabricators, the artists who turned raw industrial waste into structural beauty. I started using the scrap metal at night, teaching myself to weld, turning my sketches of broken buildings into small, jagged sculptures. One night, a regular client, a high-end restaurant owner named Silas, saw one of my pieces on the workbench. "Who made the armor?" he asked. "It's not armor," I said, wiping grease from my forehead. "It's a house that won't fall down." He bought it for $500. It was the first time I'd ever felt like I owned my own shadow.
Over the next few years, I worked double shifts. I took community college classes in structural engineering. I moved from the shop floor to my own small studio. I started designing furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, pieces made of reclaimed steel and shattered glass, held together by visible, beautiful welds. I leaned into the mistakes. I made the scars of the metal the focal point. By 24, I was the name people whispered in the design world, the girl from the Foundry. I was successful, I was wealthy, and I was entirely, blissfully alone. Then came the call, not from my parents, but from Leo. He sounded different, stripped of the arrogance he'd worn like a cloak. "Nancy," he whispered, "it's over. The firm, Alistair, got caught up in a Ponzi scheme. He was trying to cover losses from a bad development in Dubai. The feds moved in this morning. They're seizing the Aspen house. They're seizing everything." I sat in my studio, looking at a chair I'd just finished, a throne of blackened steel. "And," I said, "they're homeless, Nancy, literally. Mom is staying in a motel that smells like cigarettes. They're begging to see you. They heard about your success. They think you can fix the mistake."
I felt a cold shiver of satisfaction that should have scared me, but it didn't. Tell them to meet me at the old house in 48 hours. I'll be there for the auction. The Aspen mansion looked like a corpse. The glass was smudged, the lawn was brown, and the seized tape fluttered in the wind like a yellow ribbon on a funeral wreath. My parents were standing by the gate, huddled together. Vivian's hair was gray at the roots, her designer coat pilled and dirty. Alistair looked small. For the first time in my life, he looked like a man who could be knocked over by a breeze. "Nancy," Vivian gasped, stepping toward me. "Thank God. You have to help us. The lawyers say if we can just get a bridge loan, if we can just show some assets." "I'm not here to give you a loan, Vivian," I said. I didn't call her Mom. That word had died in a bus station in Idaho. "We were so proud when we heard about your designs. We always knew you had that spark. That night at the gala, we were just trying to toughen you up. It was a father's love, Nancy." "A father's love doesn't have a laugh track," I said. I walked into the auction. I sat in the front row. I watched as the things they had worshipped, the art, the furniture, the very walls that had housed my misery, were sold off piece by piece. When the house itself came up, I raised my paddle. I didn't stop until the hammer fell. I bought the house, every glass wall, every steel beam. Afterward, in the empty foyer, I handed them a packet of papers. "This is your lifeline," I said. Vivienne reached for it, her eyes filling with hope. "You're letting us stay?" "Read the contract," I said. The terms were brutal. I would provide them with a small 2-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood in Seattle. I would pay their basic utilities and a modest grocery allowance. In exchange, they would sign over every remaining personal asset. They would undergo mandatory financial counseling, and most importantly, they would work. Vivienne would volunteer 40 hours a week at a women's shelter for those fleeing domestic abuse. Alistair would work at the foundry as a floor sweeper, under Sarah's supervision. "You want me to sweep floors?" Alistair whispered, horrified, "in front of people who know me?" "I want you to learn what it's like to be the help," I said. "I want you to see the 1% write-off from the bottom up." "And if we say no?" Vivienne asked, her old arrogance flickering for a second. "Then you can sleep in that motel until the money runs out, which, according to these bank statements, should be about Tuesday." They signed. They had no choice. The most dramatic moment didn't happen in a courtroom or at an auction. It happened 3 months later. I went to the foundry to check on a shipment. I saw my father, Alistair, in a stained jumpsuit pushing a broom across the oily floor. He stopped when he saw me. He didn't look angry. He looked exhausted. "Nancy," he said, leaning on the broom, "you missed a spot by the lathe, Alistair," I said. He looked down, nodded, and went back to work. I turned my childhood home in Aspen into a retreat for young artists, kids who had been told they were the mistakes in their own families. We call it the error room. On the wall of the dining room, where the mahogany table used to stand, I had a quote engraved in the steel. "The things they wish to write off are the only things that endure." My parents are still in that apartment. I see them once a year for a formal dinner, not at a club, but at the diner where I used to eat when I was broke. We don't talk about the past. We talk about the cost of eggs and the weather. They are small people, living small lives, and they finally know that they were never the architects of my story. They were just the debris I had to clear before I could build something that mattered. Revenge isn't a scream, it's the sound of a broom hitting the floor, day after day, in a room you no longer own.
The rain didn't just fall over Blackwood Manor. It wept. It was a cold, piercing October downpour that turned the gravel driveway into a sludge of gray mud and soaked through the expensive wool coats of the mourners. I stood 10 paces behind the rest of the family, a solitary figure in a plain black trench coat that had seen better days. My father, Arthur Sterling, was being lowered into the earth in a casket that cost more than my annual rent. To my left stood my brother, Julian, his face a mask of practiced stoic grief, though I could see his eyes darting toward his Rolex every few minutes. To my right was my sister, Beatrice, dabbing dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, her mind clearly already calculating the resale value of our mother's diamonds. And then there was me, Cassandra, the disgrace, the girl who had walked away from the Sterling millions 6 years ago because I couldn't stomach the lies that built them. Before we continue with this journey of hidden secrets and cold-blooded betrayal, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss how the black sheep of the family turned the tables on the wolves. The graveside service was short. The minister spoke of Arthur's charity and leadership, words that tasted like ash to me. My father was a man who moved people like chess pieces. He didn't love, he managed. And in the end, he had managed to die alone in that cavernous house, while Julian and Beatrice were busy social climbing in Europe. "Cassandra," a voice hissed. I turned to see Beatrice looking me up and down with a sneer. "I'm surprised you showed your face. After the way you humiliated Father, I'd have thought you'd have the decency to stay in whatever hovel you've been hiding in." "I came to say goodbye, Beatrice," I said quietly, "not to fight." "There's nothing to fight over," Julian added, stepping up beside her. He looked at me with a cold, superior pity. "Father made his wishes very clear before he passed. He didn't forget your rebellion. Just a heads up for the will reading this afternoon. Don't expect to leave Blackwood with anything more than the clothes on your back." I didn't come for the money. I lied. The truth was, I didn't care about the money, but I cared about the truth. And I knew my father. He was many things, but he wasn't predictable. We gathered in the grand library of Blackwood Manor 2 hours later. The room was suffocating, filled with the scent of old leather, floor wax, and the heavy, floral stench of too many funeral lilies. The family lawyer, Mr. Henderson, sat behind the massive oak desk. He had been my father's shark for 30 years. He looked at me with a flicker of something. Was it guilt or just exhaustion? "Thank you all for coming," Henderson began, his voice rasping. Arthur was quite specific about the reading of his final testament. He wanted it done immediately following the interment. Julian sat in the front row, legs crossed, looking like he already owned the room. Beatrice sat next to him, checking her reflection in a compact mirror. I sat in the shadows at the very back. I, Arthur Sterling, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. To my son, Julian Sterling, I leave the Sterling Holdings shares and the downtown penthouse. Julian's chest puffed out. He smirked. To my daughter, Beatrice Sterling, I leave the family jewelry collection, the villa in Tuscany, and a trust fund in the amount of $5 million. Beatrice let out a soft, theatrical sigh of relief.
Henderson paused, his eyes shifting to me. "And to my youngest daughter, Cassandra Sterling." The room went silent. I could hear the rain drumming against the stained glass windows. "I leave the sum of $1 and a set of old keys to the garden shed. It is my hope that she finds the independence she so loudly craved during our final argument." Beatrice let out a sharp, jagged laugh. $1. Oh, Cassandra, that's almost poetic. Julian stood up, smoothing his suit. "Well, that settles that. Henderson, we'll need the keys to the main safe by tonight. And as for you, Cassandra," he turned to me, his smile sharpening into a blade, "you have 1 hour to pack whatever is left of your childhood things and vacate the premises. This house is now jointly owned by Beatrice and myself, and we don't want any trespassers." I looked at Julian. Then I looked at Henderson. The lawyer wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the paper in his hand, his knuckles white. "The will," I said, my voice cutting through their celebration. "What is the date on that document, Mr. Henderson?" Julian barked a laugh. "What does it matter? It's signed and witnessed, Cassandra. Give it up." "The date, please," I repeated. Henderson cleared his throat. "It's dated 14 months ago, August 12th.
I stood up slowly, the floorboards creaking beneath me. I walked toward the desk, ignoring the glares from my siblings. I pulled a small, battered envelope from my inner coat pocket. "That's interesting," I said, placing the envelope on the desk, "because my father visited me 3 months ago. In my hovel, as Beatrice calls it. He stayed for 4 hours. We talked about a lot of things. Mostly, we talked about how he had realized his other 2 children had already started embezzling from the Sterling Charity Fund to pay off their gambling and fashion debts." Beatrice's face went white. Julian's smirk faltered. "That's a lie," Julian shouted. "Father was loyal to us. He knew you were the one who betrayed the family." "He knew you framed me for the embezzlement 6 years ago," I corrected him, my voice rising. "And in those final months, while he was sick and you 2 were too busy to answer his calls, he did some digging. He found the paper trail, Julian. He found the offshore accounts you and Beatrice opened in his name." I pushed the envelope toward Henderson. "Open it," I commanded. Henderson's hands shook as he tore the seal. He pulled out a single sheet of heavy parchment, along with a small USB drive. He began to read, his eyes widening with every line. "This," Henderson stammered, "this is a later codicil. It's dated only 10 weeks ago. It was notarized by an independent firm in the city." "Read it," Julian hissed, stepping forward. "Read it now." Henderson swallowed hard. "I, Arthur Sterling, having discovered the depth of the betrayal by my eldest children, Julian and Beatrice, do hereby revoke all previous wills. To Julian and Beatrice, I leave the sum of $1 each, the price of their loyalty. To my daughter Cassandra, who was the only one to tell me the truth, even when it cost her everything, I leave the entirety of the Sterling estate, including Blackwood Manor, all holdings, and all liquid assets, effective immediately." The silence that followed was deafening. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Beatrice was the first to break. She screamed, a raw, ugly sound, and lunged for the paper in Henderson's hand. "It's a fake! She forged it! She's always been a liar!" Julian grabbed Henderson by the lapels. "You were his lawyer! How did this happen? How did he sign this without you?" "Because he didn't trust you, Julian," I said, stepping between them, "and he didn't trust Henderson either. He knew Henderson was helping you hide the embezzlement.
That USB drive, it contains the audio recordings Father made of your conversations during his final weeks. He recorded you both laughing about how you'd put him in a cheap home once the will was settled. He recorded Henderson advising you on how to tweak the original will to make sure I was cut out.
Julian backed away, his face twisting into a mask of pure rage. You think you've won? We'll tie this up in court for decades. We have the best lawyers in the country. You're still just a penniless waitress, Cassandra. You can't fight us. I smiled then. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent 6 years learning how to survive in a world they didn't understand. I'm not fighting you, Julian, I said. I'm evicting you. And as for the lawyers, you might want to save your remaining cash, because the police are waiting in the foyer. Father didn't just change his will, he filed a formal report regarding the embezzlement and the forgery of the will you just tried to present as his last wishes. As if on cue, the heavy oak doors of the library swung open. 2 men in suits and 3 uniformed officers stepped in. "Julian Sterling, Beatrice Sterling?" the lead detective asked. "We have warrants for your arrest regarding grand larceny, wire fraud, and conspiracy." Beatrice collapsed into a chair, sobbing into her silk handkerchief. This time, the tears were very real. Julian tried to bolt toward the French doors leading to the garden, but the officers were faster. They tackled him into the very desk where he had planned to claim his fortune. As they were being led out in handcuffs, Julian turned his head, his eyes burning with hatred. "This isn't over, Cassandra. This is our house." I looked around the room that had once been a prison of expectations. "No, Julian," I said, picking up the dollar bill Henderson had dropped on the floor. "It's a museum now. A museum of what happens when you value paper over blood." I watched them being loaded into the back of the police cruisers through the rain-streaked windows. The sirens faded into the distance, leaving only the sound of the storm. Henderson was still sitting at the desk, looking like a ghost. "Cassandra, I was only doing what I thought was best for the firm." "Get out, Henderson," I said. "You have 24 hours to turn over all files to my new legal team. If a single page is missing, I'll make sure you share a cell with my brother." He didn't argue. He scrambled out of the room, leaving me alone in the heart of Blackwood Manor. I walked over to the fireplace and looked at the portrait of my father hanging above it. He looked stern, cold, and lonely. I pulled the garden shed keys from my pocket, the ones from the fake will. I realized then that even in their forgery, Julian and Beatrice had been led by my father's hand. He had known they would use the garden shed insult. It was a private joke between us. In the garden shed, hidden under the floorboards, was the real treasure. Not money, but the letters my mother had written me before she died, the ones my father had hidden to keep me under his thumb. I was the master of Blackwood now, but as I looked at the empty, echoing halls, I knew I wouldn't stay. I would sell it all, every brick, every diamond, every tainted share. I would build something that actually helped people. The black sheep had finally come home, and she had brought the fire with her. The first week as the mistress of Blackwood Manor was not a dream. It was a haunting. Now that the police sirens had faded and the house was empty of the vultures, the silence was heavy. Every floorboard I stepped on felt like it was groaning under the weight of secrets. I had the keys, I had the deed, and I had the bank accounts. But I also had the ghosts of a family that had spent decades trying to destroy one another. Julian and Beatrice were currently sitting in a holding cell downtown, their high-priced defense attorneys scrambling to find a loophole in the mountain of evidence father had left behind. But Julian was like a cornered rat. He was most dangerous when he had nothing left to lose. I spent my nights in Father's study going through the Red Ledger, a private book he'd kept that wasn't part of the official Sterling Holdings records. It was a map of his sins and theirs. Before we reveal the final, shocking secret hidden in the walls of Blackwood, make sure you're subscribed. We're reaching the climax of this family's downfall, and you won't believe the twist that's coming next. On the 5th day, a courier arrived. He didn't have a legal summons. He had a handwritten note on prison stationery. It was from Julian. Cassandra, you think you've won the crown, but you've only inherited a tomb. Ask Henderson about Project Chimera. If you don't get us out of here by Friday, the house won't be yours. It won't belong to anyone. It will burn. Check the basement, little sister. Check the foundation. My blood turned to ice. Julian's handwriting was frantic, the ink digging into the paper. I knew that tone. It wasn't just a threat, it was a countdown. I called my new attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Elena Vance. Within the hour, we were standing in the damp, cold basement of Blackwood Manor. This wasn't the finished wine cellar where my parents held tastings. This was the original foundation, a labyrinth of stone and shadows. "What is Project Chimera?" Elena asked, her flashlight cutting through the dark. "I don't know," I whispered. But my father was obsessed with security. He always said the greatest treasure is the one that destroys the thief. We moved toward the back of the basement, behind a heavy iron door that required one of the keys from the garden shed, the set Julian and Beatrice had mocked. The key turned with a heavy mechanical thud. Inside wasn't gold or documents. It was a server room, cool, humming, and glowing with blinking blue lights. He was data mining, Elena realized, stepping toward the main console. Arthur wasn't just running a construction firm. He was collecting leverage on every politician, judge, and CEO in the state. I realized then what Julian's poison pill was. Julian had helped Father build this. He knew that if this room was accessed without the proper sequence, it would trigger a dead man switch. It would leak every piece of blackmail to the press, but it would also trigger a legal clause that would liquidate the Sterling estate into a state-controlled trust for unresolved liabilities. In short, if I stayed, I would be the face of a massive criminal scandal. If I left, the house would be bulldozed. Julian wanted me to choose between prison or poverty. He thinks I'll trade his freedom for the server's kill code, I said, staring at the screen. Can you shut it down? Elena asked. I can't, I said, but I know someone who can. I visited Julian in prison the next morning. He sat behind the glass, looking haggard but triumphant. He hadn't shaved, and his orange jumpsuit looked absurdly cheap on a man who used to wear $3,000 suits. Tick-tock, Cassie, he sneered, picking at his fingernails. Friday at noon, that's when the Chimera wakes up. Every dirty secret Father ever kept, and a few I added myself, will hit the wire. You'll be the owner of a criminal empire. The feds will seize Blackwood before you can even pack your bags. "You'd destroy the family name just to spite me?" I asked. "The name is already dead," he shouted, slamming his hand against the glass. "You killed it when you called the cops. If I can't have the throne, I'll make sure you're buried under it." "And Beatrice, Julian? She's in the infirmary, Julian. She's having a nervous breakdown. Do you even care?" "Beatrice was always weak," he dismissed her with a wave of his hand. "Give me the code to the external drive I know you found in the shed. I'll stop the leak, and you'll find a way to get the charges dropped. We'll split the estate 50-50, and you can go back to your little life." I leaned in close to the glass. "You always underestimated me, Julian. You thought I was the black sheep because I couldn't handle the business. The truth is, I was the only one who actually learned how Father's mind worked." I pulled a small tablet from my bag and turned it toward him. On the screen was a live feed of the server room, but there was a man there, not a lawyer, but a technician from a private cybersecurity firm I'd hired with my first draw of the estate's funds. "What is this?" Julian hissed. "Father didn't just leave me the keys, Julian. He left me the logs. He knew you'd try to use Chimera as a weapon. He left me a second codicil hidden in the digital BIOS of that server. It's not a kill code, it's a redirection." Julian's eyes widened as he watched the technician tap the final key. "Everything in that server, every bribe, every secret, every piece of blackmail has just been sent to the district attorney. But here's the best part. Father's logs prove that you were the one who managed the Chimera project for the last 5 years. You weren't just a beneficiary, you were the architect of the blackmail ring." Julian's face went from pale to ghostly white. No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't set me up like that." "He didn't set you up, Julian. He just didn't protect you. He decided that if his children were going to be monsters, they should at least be jailed ones." I stood up, adjusting my coat. "The inheritance trap wasn't for me, Julian. It was for you. Father knew that as soon as he died, your greed would lead you straight to the basement to try and leverage his secrets. He knew you'd try to burn the house down if you couldn't own it. So he made the house the evidence."
Julian began to scream, a guttural, panicked sound as the guards moved in to take him back to his cell. "You'll pay for this! Cassandra, you're a Sterling! You're just like us!" "No," I said, looking at him one last time. "I'm the one who's selling the name." The final act of the Sterling drama didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened on the front lawn of Blackwood Manor. I didn't sell the house to a developer. I didn't turn it into a museum. I donated the land to the city to be turned into a public park and a community center for underprivileged youth. The house itself, the cold, marble, blood-soaked mansion, was dismantled. I watched the first wrecking ball swing into the library where my siblings had tried to steal my life. Beatrice took a plea deal. She testified against Julian in exchange for a reduced sentence in a minimum security facility. She'll be out in 4 years, but she'll never see a dime of the Sterling money. I set up a very small, controlled trust for her, just enough for a studio apartment and groceries. It was more than she deserved, but enough to ensure she could never claim I was the monster she was. Julian wasn't so lucky. With the Chimera evidence, he was sentenced to 30 years. He'll spend the rest of his golden years in a concrete cell, dreaming of the velvet curtains he used to hide behind. As for me, I moved back to the city, but not to a hovel. I bought a modest, sun-filled loft. I don't go by Cassandra Sterling anymore. I took my mother's maiden name. I kept one thing from Blackwood, the garden shed keys. I had them melted down and turned into a small, abstract sculpture that sits on my desk. It reminds me that some doors are meant to be locked and some are meant to be torn off their hinges. The black sheep didn't just inherit the estate, she destroyed the legacy of greed that built it and planted something honest in its place. The Sterling name is gone, but for the first time in my life, I can breathe. Thank you for sticking with us through this journey of revenge and redemption. Cassandra's story is a reminder that the best way to deal with a black sheep label is to use it to lead the wolves into their own trap. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up and comment "justice" below. And if you have a story of family betrayal or a black sheep victory, share it in the comments. We might just turn it into our next script. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more dramatic stories like this. See you in the next one.
Every bride has a nightmare about her wedding dress. You dream the zipper breaks, or you spill coffee on it, or it just doesn't fit. But my nightmare was different. My nightmare was walking into my sewing room 12 hours before I was supposed to walk down the aisle and finding my life's work destroyed. My future mother-in-law, Susan, was standing over the wreckage with a glass of Pinot Noir in one hand and my fabric shears in the other. "Oops," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "It tripped, and then, well, the scissors just slipped. It's a sign, dear. You were meant to wear my dress all along." She smiled. It was the smile of a predator. My name is Chloe. I'm a professional bridal couturier. And Susan just made the biggest mistake of her miserable life. If you've ever had a family member try to ruin your big day, hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel, and it lets me know I'm not alone in this craziness. I have been sewing since I was 6 years old. It's not just my hobby, it's my career. I own a boutique bridal shop in the city. When my fiancé, James, proposed, I knew exactly what I was going to wear. I didn't buy a dress, I made one. I spent 8 months on it. Hand-imported French lace, 3,000 tiny Swarovski crystals, each one applied by hand with tweezers. It was a mermaid silhouette with a detachable cathedral train. It was valued at roughly $15,000. But to me, it was priceless. James, my fiancé, is amazing. He's kind, supportive, and loves my work. His mother, Susan, not so much. Susan is a traditionalist. That's code for controlling narcissist. From the moment we got engaged, she became obsessed with one thing, her wedding dress. It was a 1986 nightmare. Puffy sleeves that looked like marshmallows, scratchy synthetic satin, and a neckline that went up to the chin. It had been sitting in a box in her attic for 30 years, smelling like mothballs and disappointment. "It's a family tradition," Susan insisted at every Sunday dinner. "I wore it, my mother wore it, she didn't. You have to wear it, Chloe. It would mean so much to me." I tried to be polite. "Susan, it's a lovely gesture, but I'm a designer. I've been dreaming of making my own gown my whole life." She would just purse her lips. "Well, that's very selfish of you, denying a mother her moment." Let me know in the comments, would you wear a dress you hated just to please your mother-in-law, or would you stand your ground like I did? The night before. Because our venue was a historic estate about an hour away, we were all staying in the on-site guest cottages the night before the wedding. I brought my dress in a heavy-duty garment bag. I hung it up in the bridal suite, which was really just a spare bedroom in the cottage I was sharing with my bridesmaids. At around 9 p.m., my bridesmaids and I went to the main house for a quick rehearsal drink. I locked the door to our cottage. I had the only key. Or so I thought. James had a key, and James, being the sweet mama's boy he is, we're working on it, had given his spare key to Susan earlier that day because she claimed she needed to drop off a welcome gift for me. The welcome gift was sabotage. I came back to the cottage at 10:30 p.m. My bridesmaids, Sarah and Emily, were giggling behind me. We were excited. We were happy. I opened the door. The smell hit me first. Cheap, distinct red wine. "Did someone open a bottle?" Sarah asked. Then I saw the light on in the bedroom. I walked in, and my world shattered. My dress was off the hanger. It was lying on the hardwood floor in a heap. The bodice, the part I had spent 200 hours beating, was slashed, not torn, slashed. Someone had taken heavy shears and cut right through the silt and the boning. And then there was the stain, a massive, dark purple Rorschach test spreading across the white lace train. Susan was sitting in the armchair in the corner. She looked comfortable. She wasn't even hiding the scissors. They were on her lap. "Susan?" I choked out. I couldn't breathe. She looked up, feigning shock. "Oh, Chloe, you're back early." What did you do?" "I came in to steam it for you," she lied, her eyes wide and innocent. "I wanted to do something nice since you've been so stressed, but I'm just so clumsy. I tripped over the rug and the wine glass just flew out of my hand, and I tried to catch myself with the scissors and, oh, it's just ruined." She stood up and walked over to the corpse of my dress. She kicked it slightly with her toe. "Look at it," she sighed. "It's a disaster. You can't wear this. It looks like a crime scene." My bridesmaids were in the doorway, gasping. Sarah started crying. I didn't cry. The shock was instantly replaced by a cold, sharp rage. I looked at the cuts. They were vertical, precise. You don't accidentally trip and slice a corset in 3 perfectly parallel lines. "You did this on purpose," I whispered. "How dare you?" Susan gasped, clutching her pearls. "I'm trying to help you, and honestly, it's for the best. That dress was a little tacky, a little too showy for a church wedding." She smiled then, a genuine, creepy smile. "But don't worry, Chloe. I saved the day. I brought my dress. It's in the trunk of my car. We can have it altered in the morning. It will fit you perfectly." She walked towards the door, stopping right next to me. "You're going to look like a real Miller bride tomorrow. No more playing dress-up." She left. As soon as the door closed, I collapsed. I sank to the floor and touched the ruined lace. "Chloe, I am so sorry," Emily said, rushing to my side. "We can fix it. Maybe we can patch it?" "We can't," I said, my voice dead. "The structural boning is cut. The silk is stained. It's gone." "I'm going to kill her," Sarah said, grabbing her phone. "I'm calling James." "No!" I snapped. Sarah froze. "What? Chloe, she murdered your dress." "If you call James right now," I said, standing up, "he will come over here, he will scream at his mother, Susan will cry and play the victim, she'll say it was an accident, she'll say I'm being hysterical, it will ruin the wedding, and she will still win because I'll have nothing to wear." "So what, you're gonna wear her 80s marshmallow dress?" Emily asked, horrified. I looked at the dress on the floor, then I looked at the corner of the room. Up at the top of the bookshelf. A tiny green light was blinking. I'm a designer. I deal with high-value fabrics and custom orders. I'm paranoid about theft and liability. Whenever I travel with a masterpiece gown, I set up a portable Wise security cam in the room, just in case housekeeping gets curious or a pipe bursts. I walked over to the bookshelf and grabbed the camera. I'm not going to wear her dress, I said, pulling up the app on my phone, and I'm not going to scream at her. Not yet. I scrubbed the footage back to 10:15 p.m. The video was crystal clear in 1080p night vision. It showed Susan entering the room. She wasn't carrying a steamer. She was carrying a glass of wine and the scissors. She walked straight to the dress. She didn't trip. She stood there, took a sip of wine, and then aggressively stabbed the scissors into the bodice. She slashed it. Then she poured the wine slowly, deliberately, over the train, rubbing it in with her foot. She even spoke to the empty room. "Trash," she muttered on the recording. "My son deserves better than a seamstress." I got her. A dark smile spread across my face. "What are we going to do?" Sarah asked. "We have 12 hours, I said. "Sarah, go to my car. In the trunk, there is an emergency garment bag. It's my sample sale backup dress. It's plain white satin, simple, boring, but it fits." "And the video?" Emily asked. "The video," I said, clutching the phone, "is for the reception." The next morning was a masterclass in acting. I put on the plain satin dress. It was fine. It wasn't my dress, but it was elegant. Susan came into the bridal suite while I was doing my makeup. She was carrying her monstrosity of a wedding gown. "I brought it," she chirped. Then she saw me in the satin dress. Her face fell. "Oh, what is that?" "I had a backup," I said sweetly. "It's not as detailed as my original, but it will do." Susan looked furious. She wanted me in her dress. She wanted to mark her territory. "It's very plain," she sniffed. "Are you sure you don't want to try this one on? It has history." "I'm sure, Susan. Thank you for offering, though. It was so clumsy of you to trip last night. I hope you didn't bruise yourself." She narrowed her eyes. She was trying to figure out if I bought her lie. "I am fine," she said tightly. "Just heartbroken for you." "Don't be. Everything happens for a reason," I said, applying my lipstick in the mirror. The ceremony was beautiful, despite the underlying tension. James looked handsome. When he saw me walking down the aisle, he teared up. He whispered, "You look beautiful, but wasn't there lace?" "Long story," I whispered back. "I'll tell you at the reception." Susan sat in the front row, wearing a silver dress that was dangerously close to white. She looked smug. She thought she had won. She thought she had taught me a lesson about who was the alpha female in this family. She had no idea that I had already given the USB drive to the DJ. The reception was in a grand ballroom. Everyone was drinking, dancing, having a great time. Then came the toasts. The best man spoke, my maid of honor spoke. Then Susan grabbed the microphone. Of course she did. "Hello, everyone," she beamed. "I just want to say how happy I am for my son James and for Chloe, who looked nice today, even if things didn't go exactly to plan with her dress." She gave a little pity laugh. "Poor dear. Accidents happen, right?" I stood up. I took the microphone from her hand. "Thank you, Susan." My voice was amplified through the hall. "Actually, Susan is right. My original dress, the one I spent 8 months making, was destroyed last night. Susan told me it was a terrible accident involving some red wine and a stumble." The room went quiet. James looked confused. "Chloe, what are you talking about?" "I was devastated," I continued, "but then I remembered I have a security camera in my workroom, and I thought we should all see exactly how this accident happened." I pointed to the DJ. He hit play. A giant projector screen descended behind the head table. The video started. The entire room watched in silence as Susan, clear as day on the giant screen, walked up to the dress. They watched her slash it. They saw the hate in her eyes. They heard her say, "My son deserves better than a seamstress." The silence in the room was deafening. Then the gasps started. Susan stood there, frozen. Her face went from smug to pale white in 3 seconds. I turned to James. He was staring at the screen, his mouth open. Then he looked at his mother. The look in his eyes was not sadness, it was pure disgust. "Mom?" he said, his voice cracked. You did that? It's fake!" Susan shrieked, her voice shrill and desperate. "It's CGI! She edited it! She hates me!" "It's time-stamped, Susan," I said calmly. James stood up. He walked over to his mother. "Get out," he said. "James, you can't believe her over me. I am looking at a video of you destroying my wife's property. You destroyed her art. You lied to my face. Get out. Get out of my wedding. Get out of my life." Susan looked around the room. Her friends, her family, everyone was looking at her like she was a monster. She burst into tears, fake, loud tears, and ran out of the ballroom. When a bomb goes off, there's a ringing in your ears. That's what the ballroom felt like after Susan ran out. The video of her slashing my dress had ended. The screen was black, and for about 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then my dad stood up. He walked over to James and put a hand on his shoulder. "Son," he said, loud enough for the front tables to hear, "I'm sorry you had to see that, but I'm proud of you for standing by your wife." James looked like he had been punched in the gut. He was pale, he was shaking, but he squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry, Chloe," he whispered. "I had no idea she was capable of that." "I know," I said, leaning into him, "but now we're free." We didn't let Susan ruin the rest of the night. The DJ, reading the room perfectly, put on "I Will Survive." The tension broke. We danced, we drank, we celebrated. Not just our marriage, but our liberation from a toxic woman. But I knew the war wasn't over. Susan wasn't the type to retreat. She was the type to reload. We woke up the next morning as husband and wife. It should have been blissful. Instead, our phones were blowing up. Susan had been busy. She had created a group chat with James, me, and about 12 other family members, aunts, cousins, even James's grandmother. "Susan, I cannot believe you humiliated me like that. It was a private family matter. That video was edited. Chloe is a liar and she manipulated you, James." Then came the flying monkeys, the family members who enabled the narcissist. "Aunt Linda, James, call your mother. She is hysterical. You can't just kick her out of your wedding. She's your mom." Cousin Mike, "Bro, that was harsh. It was just a dress. You embarrassed the whole family." James read the messages. He didn't reply. He just looked at me. "She destroyed your work. She destroyed your property. And she's making herself the victim." "She's not going to get away with it," I said. "I'm not just a bride, James. I'm a business owner, and she just destroyed $15,000 worth of inventory." "Do what you have to do," James said. He blocked his mother's number right then and there. "I'm done." I didn't call Susan. I didn't text her. I treated this like a business transaction. I sat down at my laptop and opened my invoicing software. I created a new client, Susan Miller. Itemized list: custom bridal gown design and consultation, $2,500. Materials: imported French Chantilly lace, silk charmeuse, Swarovski crystals, $4,800. Labor: 300 hours at $45 an hour expert rate, $13,500. Emotional distress and rush fee, $2,000. Destruction of property fee, $500. Total due, $23,300. I attached a copy of the security camera footage, just in case she lost it, and a formal demand letter. Payment is due within 30 days. Failure to pay will result in legal action. I sent it via certified mail and email. 3 days later, I got an email back. It wasn't a payment confirmation. It was a threat. From Susan Miller. Subject: you are insane. I am not paying you a dime. That dress was a hobby project. It wasn't worth real money. You are delusional. If you try to sue me, I will countersue for defamation of character for showing that video at the wedding. My reputation is ruined because of you. James, if you are reading this, come home. She thought I was bluffing. She thought because I was family now, I wouldn't drag her into court. She forgot that I deal with contracts for a living. I called my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. He's a shark who usually deals with copyright infringement, but he was very interested in this case. She admitted to the act in the email? Henderson asked. She said it wasn't worth real money, implying she knows she did it. And I have the video. We're filing in civil court, Henderson said. This is well above the small claims limit. We're going for property damage and legal fees. Serving Susan with papers was the most satisfying moment of my post-wedding life. We hired a process server to deliver the lawsuit to her workplace. She works as a receptionist at a high-end dental office. Apparently, she screamed at the server and threw the papers on the floor in the lobby. Not a good look, Susan. The court date was set for 4 months later. In that time, James maintained no contact. Susan tried to show up at our apartment twice. We didn't answer the door. We just saved the Ring doorbell footage for the judge. The day of the trial, Susan showed up wearing black, like she was at a funeral. She had a lawyer, a tired-looking man who clearly knew he had a losing hand. I walked in with Henderson. I was wearing a sharp navy suit. I looked like a CEO, not a scorned daughter-in-law. The proceedings were brutal for her. My lawyer called me to the stand first. Mrs. Miller, can you explain the value of the dress? I am a professional couturier, I explained, presenting my portfolio and invoices for similar custom gowns I've sold. A gown of this complexity retails for between $12,000 and $18,000. The materials alone cost nearly $5,000. Then we played the video. Again. The judge, a stern man named Judge Davis, watched the screen. He watched Susan sip her wine. He watched her slash the bodice. He watched her pour the wine. When the video ended, Judge Davis looked over his glasses at Susan. Mrs. Miller, that looks extremely deliberate. Susan's lawyer tried to argue that it was a domestic dispute and that the value of the dress was inflated because I made it myself. It's just cloth, Susan blurted out, interrupting her own lawyer. She sewed it in her spare bedroom. It's not like she bought it from Vera Wang. It's a craft project. Judge Davis narrowed his eyes. Ma'am, if a carpenter builds a table in his garage, does that table have no value? If an artist paints a canvas at home, is it worthless? Susan sputtered. Well, no, but the plaintiff is a professional. Her time has value, her materials have value, and your actions were malicious. Then came the kicker. My lawyer introduced the email where she threatened to sue me for defamation. Defamation requires the statement to be false, Judge Davis said, looking at Susan. The video is true. You did destroy the dress. Therefore, showing the video is not defamation. It is simply the truth. The judgment didn't take long. I find in favor of the plaintiff, Judge Davis ruled. I am awarding the full value of the materials, $4,800, and the labor, $13,500. I am also awarding legal fees, $5,000, due to the malicious nature of the act. The defendant, Susan Miller, is ordered to pay $23,300 to the plaintiff. Susan gasped. I don't have $23,000. Then I suggest you sell your wedding dress, the judge said dryly, or perhaps garnish your wages. Case closed. The bang of the gavel was the sweetest sound I have ever heard. Susan didn't pay immediately, of course. We had to file a lien against her car and threaten to garnish her wages. Eventually, she took out a loan to pay me. Every cent of that $23,000 went into a down payment for our new house, a house that Susan does not have the address to. James is doing much better. He's in therapy, unpacking years of guilt and manipulation. He realizes now that his mother didn't destroy the dress because she hated the lace. She destroyed it because she hated that I had something she couldn't control. As for the dress, I didn't throw it away. I took the slashed, stained fabric and I repurposed it. I cut out the ruined parts, I dyed the remaining lace a deep midnight blue to hide the wine stains, and I made a cocktail dress out of it. I wore it to our first anniversary dinner. When James saw me in it, he smiled. "Is that?" he asked. "It is," I said. She tried to destroy it. I made it into something new, something she can't touch. We're happy. We're free. And my sewing room has a new lock on the door, just in case. They say possession is 9/10 of the law, but what they don't tell you is that the other 1/10 is made of paper, ink, and cold, hard revenge. I stood there in the freezing rain, watching a stranger drill through the lock of the front door, a door I had sanded by hand for 3 days straight, a door I had varnished until it glowed like honey in the sunlight. My stepmother, Brenda, stood on the porch. She was dry, she was warm, and she was smiling. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a vulture that had finally waited long enough for the animal to stop twitching. "Don't look so tragic, Maya," she called out over the sound of the drill. "You knew this day was coming. You're a big girl. It's time to move on." Beside her, my stepsister Tiffany was filming me on her phone, probably for a TikTok. "Bye, Felicia," she chirped, waving a manicured hand that had never lifted anything heavier than a credit card. They were kicking me out of the house my father and I had spent the last 5 years restoring. They were kicking me out of my home, my workplace, and my sanctuary. They thought they had won because they had the will. They thought they had won because my father's heart gave out before he could sign the new papers. But Brenda and Tiffany forgot one tiny detail. They looked at the house and saw a payday. I looked at the house and saw collateral. My name is Maya. I'm a licensed general contractor, and I was about to teach my stepfamily a very expensive lesson in construction law. If you've ever had someone take credit for your hard work, or if you've dealt with family who only care about money, tap that like button. It helps me share this story, and honestly, I think we all need to stick together against people like Brenda. To understand why watching that drill bite into the wood felt like a physical knife in my chest, you have to understand what the Rosewood Estate used to be. 5 years ago, it wasn't an estate. It was a rotting carcass of a Victorian mansion sitting on 10 acres of overgrown briar patches. The roof had collapsed in the east wing. The basement was flooded with 3 feet of brackish water that smelled like rust and decay. The locals called it the haunted dump on the hill. My father, Thomas, saw it differently. Dad was a dreamer. He was an architect who had spent his whole life designing boring, gray corporate office parks to pay the bills, but his soul was in historical restoration. When my mom passed away from cancer, Dad seemed to shrink. He lost his spark. He spent days just sitting in his armchair staring at the wall. Then he found Rosewood. I remember the day he drove me up that winding, potholed driveway. I was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in construction management and a lot of student debt. "Dad," he said, his eyes shining for the first time in years. This is it. This is the legacy. I looked at the house. It was a disaster. "Dad," I said gently, "this is a money pit. The foundation is cracking. The siding is riddled with termites. It needs a bulldozer, not a paint job." "No," he insisted, grabbing my hand. "Look at the bones, Maya. Look at the craftsmanship. We can save her, you and me. We can turn this into the premier bed and breakfast in the state. I'll design it, you build it. We'll be partners." Partners. That word meant everything to me. My dad was my hero. After Mom died, it was just the two of us against the world. The idea of working side by side with him, bringing something beautiful back to life, was irresistible. So, we did it. I didn't just help around the house. I became the general contractor of record. I moved into a dusty, drafty trailer parked on the front lawn. For 2 years, I lived in that tin can while we gutted the place. I'm talking about back-breaking labor. I was the one crawling through the crawl spaces, wrapping insulation around pipes while spiders dropped in my hair. I was the one hammer-checking the concrete in the basement to install a French drain system. I managed the subcontractors, the electricians, the plumbers. I negotiated the permits with the city. When the money got tight, and it always got tight, I didn't take a salary. "Put it on the books, honey," Dad would say, looking exhausted but happy, as we ate pizza on the floor of the unfinished ballroom. "Keep a ledger of your hours. When we open, I'll pay you back with interest, plus equity. 40% of the business is yours, I promise." I trusted him. He was my dad. We didn't sign a formal partnership agreement because we were family. I just kept a detailed spreadsheet of every hour I worked, every bag of cement I paid with my own savings, and every invoice I covered when Dad's pension check was late. Then, 3 years into the project, Dad met Brenda. Brenda was a real estate agent who specialized in luxury properties, which mostly meant she was good at wearing expensive blazers and looking down her nose at people. She met Dad at a zoning hearing. Dad was lonely. I was busy working 14-hour days on the house, covered in drywall dust and sawdust. I didn't have time to date. I didn't have time to make sure Dad wasn't falling for a shark. At first, Brenda was charming. She brought us coffee, she gushed over the restoration. "Oh, Thomas, you're a genius," she would chirp, ignoring the fact that I was the one holding the nail gun. But as soon as the ring was on her finger, the mask slipped. She moved in 6 months later. By then, the main house was livable. We had finished the grand staircase, restored the original stained glass, and installed a chef's kitchen that cost more than my college tuition. Brenda brought her daughter Tiffany, a 20-year-old college dropout whose main ambition in life was to become an influencer. The dynamic changed overnight. I would come in from working on the carriage house, exhausted, sweating, covered in grease, and find Brenda and Tiffany lounging in the sunroom I just finished painting. "Maya," Brenda would say, wrinkling her nose, "do you have to track dust everywhere? We just had the cleaners here." "I'm working, Brenda," I'd say, trying to keep the peace for Dad's sake. "This isn't just a house, it's a job site." "Well, try to be less invisible," she'd sigh. "Tiffany is trying to film a get ready with me video, and your hammering is ruining the audio." Dad was caught in the middle. He loved Brenda, or at least he loved the attention she gave him. He made him feel young. She convinced him to go on vacations, to buy new suits, to relax. "You work too hard, Thomas," she would coo. "Let Maya handle the dirty work. You're the visionary." And that's exactly what happened. Dad stopped coming to the site as much. He spent more time at country clubs with Brenda. I was left alone to manage the massive project. I didn't mind the work. I loved the house. I knew every creak in the floorboards. I knew which window stuck when it rained. I had poured my soul into the mortar. But I started to get nervous. "Dad," I said one night about 6 months ago, "we need to formalize the business arrangement. The B&B is almost ready to open. We need an LLC. We need to put my equity share in writing." Dad waved me off, sipping the expensive scotch Brenda had bought him. "Don't worry, Maya. I've got it covered. I'm meeting with the lawyer next month to update the will and set up the corporation. You're going to be taken care of. This is your legacy, too." Next month turned into 2 months, then 3. Brenda was always there, distracting him. "Oh, don't bore him with business talk, Maya. Let him enjoy his retirement." I should have pushed harder. I should have dragged him to a notary. But I didn't want to be the nagging daughter. I didn't want to cause friction in his happy new marriage. And then it was too late. It happened on a Tuesday. I was up on a ladder in the West Wing installing a chandelier. My phone buzzed in my tool belt. It was Brenda. She never called me. "He collapsed," she screamed. "At the golf course. It's his heart." I drove to the hospital at 90 miles an hour. I was still wearing my work boots and my canvas overalls. I had paint in my hair. When I got to the ICU, he was already on a ventilator. The next 48 hours were a blur of beeping machines and sterile white lights. Brenda put on a performance worthy of an Oscar. She wailed, she threw herself on the chairs, she demanded the doctors do something. I just held his hand. His rough, callous hand that used to build things before she made him soft. He woke up once, briefly. The doctor said it was the last rally. He looked at me. His eyes were cloudy, terrified. He tried to speak through the mask. "Matt." I leaned in. "I'm here, Dad, I'm here." "The house," he wheezed. Fix it." "I fixed it, Dad," I cried. "It's beautiful. We finished it." "No," he struggled, his eyes darting to Brenda, who was sobbing in the corner. "The papers." And then the alarm started beeping. Nurses rushed in. They pushed me out of the room. He died 20 minutes later. I didn't just lose my father. I lost my business partner, my best friend, the only person in the world who knew what we had built together. Brenda's grief lasted exactly until the funeral was over. At the graveside service, she clung to the coffin, draped in black lace, looking like a tragic widow from a Gothic novel. But as we walked back to the limousines, I saw her texting. "Who are you texting?" I asked, wiping my eyes. She snapped her phone shut. "Just family support, Maya. Give me some space. I'm grieving." She wasn't texting family. She was texting her real estate broker. The reading of the will took place 1 week later. We gathered in the mahogany-paneled office of Dad's old family attorney, Mr. Henderson. I sat in a leather chair, still feeling numb. Brenda and Tiffany sat on the sofa opposite me. They were already looking at paint swatches. Tiffany whispered to her mom, "We should paint the dining room grayish. That old Victorian red is so tacky." I clenched my fists. "That tacky red is historically accurate to the 1890 period," I snapped. "Shh," Brenda hissed. "Show some respect." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable. He had known me since I was a kid. He looked at me with deep, profound pity. "I'm afraid," Mr. Henderson began, adjusting his glasses, "that we have a bit of a complication." "What complication?" Brenda asked sharply. "Thomas said he left everything to me." "Well," said Mr. Henderson, "the issue is the date of the will. The last executed will Thomas filed with this office is dated 7 years ago, before he met you, Brenda, and before the restoration project began." My heart leapt. If the will was 7 years old, that meant... However, Mr. Henderson continued, holding up a piece of paper, a handwritten note, signed and notarized 3 years ago, shortly after your wedding. It states, "I leave my entire estate, including the property known as Rosewood, to my beloved wife Brenda to care for and manage as she sees fit." The room spun. "What?" I whispered. But he promised. He said we were partners. He said he was going to update it last month." "He never came in, Maya," Mr. Henderson said gently. "You had an appointment scheduled, but he canceled it to go to a wine tasting." Brenda let out a small, triumphant sound. "Well, that settles it then." But what about Maya? Mr. Henderson asked, looking at Brenda. Thomas verbally expressed many times that he intended for Maya to run the bed and breakfast. Brenda sighed, smoothing her skirt. Look, Maya is a sweet girl, but she's not a business owner. She's a laborer. Tiffany and I have a vision for the house. We don't think a bed and breakfast is the right direction. It's not the right direction? I stood up, my voice shaking. It was Dad's dream. We spent 5 years building it. It was a hobby, Brenda said dismissively, and frankly, the house is too big for us. We've decided to sell. Sell? I felt like I was going to vomit. You can't sell it. It's not even open yet. The market is hot, Maya, Tiffany chimed in. We already have an offer from a developer. They want to tear it down and build luxury condos. They're offering $3 million for the land. Tear it down? I screamed. You're going to bulldoze 5 years of my life? You're going to bulldoze Dad's legacy? It's my property, Brenda said, her voice turning into ice, and I will do with it what I please. Now, regarding your living situation, she pulled a folded paper from her purse. Since the house is going on the market, we can't have you living in the guest suite anymore. It looks unprofessional to have squatters. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. Squatter? I laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. I built the room I'm sleeping in. I hung the drywall. I wired the electricity. You were helping your father, Brenda said. It was very sweet of you. Charity work is good for the soul. But you have no lease, you have no deed, you have 24 hours, or I call the sheriff.
That brings us back to the rain. I spent the next 24 hours frantically packing. Not just my clothes, but my tools, my expensive saws, my drills, my levels. I tried to take the vintage clawfoot tub I had restored and stored in the garage, but Brenda blocked the driveway with her car. That's a fixture, she yelled. It stays with the house. I didn't fight her on the tub. I was too in shock. When the deadline hit, 7 p.m. on a stormy Tuesday, Brenda was waiting on the porch with the locksmith. I threw my last duffel bag into the bed of my truck, which was scratched and dented from hauling lumber for her house. Hand over the keys, Maya, Brenda demanded. I looked at the heavy brass keyring. It held the keys to the front door, the cellar, the carriage house, and the master suite. I dropped them into her outstretched hand. You're making a mistake, Brenda, I said quietly. The rain was plastering my hair to my face. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, she sneered. I'm cashing out. Thomas was a fool to dump money into this pit. I'm the smart one. I'm taking the $3 million and moving to Florida. You can go back to whatever it is you do, fixing toilets. Tiffany giggled, still recording. Say cheese, sis. You look like a drowned rat. The locksmith finished his work. New deadbolt is in, ma'am, he said to Brenda. Good, she said. Don't come back, Maya. If I see your truck on this property again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. She turned and walked inside. The heavy oak door, my door, slammed shut. I heard the deadbolt click. I stood there for a long time. I was shivering. I was homeless. I was broke because I had poured every cent of my savings into finishing the landscaping last month. I got into my truck. The engine sputtered before turning on. The heater rattled. I drove down the winding driveway, tears blurring my vision. I passed the stone gateposts I had reset with a crane. I passed the gazebo I had built for Dad's birthday. I pulled over just outside the property line. I slammed my hands against the steering wheel and screamed. I screamed until my throat burned. Then I stopped. I looked at the passenger seat. Sitting there, under a pile of fast food wrappers, was my heavy-duty accordion folder, the one labeled Project Rosewood, Expenses and Logs. Brenda thought I was just a helper. Brenda thought I was doing charity work. Brenda thought the house was free and clear. I reached over and opened the folder.
I pulled out a specific document. It wasn't a will. It was better. It was a contract. Not with my dad, but with the house. See, 3 years ago, when the project got too big for Dad to finance out of pocket, he had to take out a construction loan, but the bank wouldn't lend to him because his credit was shot from the initial purchase. So I co-signed. But the bank required a licensed general contractor to oversee the funds. That was me. And as the general contractor, I had filed a preliminary notice at the start of the job. I flipped through the pages until I found the spreadsheet. Total unpaid labor hours, 12,500. Total unpaid material costs, $145,000. Accrued interest, calculated per the standard industry contract I had made Dad sign for the bank loan compliance. Dad never paid me. We always said, we'll settle up when we open. He didn't pay me, which meant the project didn't pay me. I wasn't just a daughter. I was a contractor who hadn't been paid for 5 years of work on a multi-million-dollar commercial renovation. And in this state, if a contractor isn't paid, they can file something very special. It's called a mechanic's lien. And if that lien isn't satisfied, the contractor can foreclose on the property. Brenda wanted to sell the house to a developer. She couldn't sell a toothpick until she paid me. I wiped my tears from my face. I looked back at the mansion glowing on the hill. "Enjoy the heat, Brenda," I whispered, "because I'm about to freeze your assets." I put the truck in gear and drove towards town. I wasn't going to a hotel. I was going to the 24-hour copy shop. I had some filing to do. The next morning, I woke up in my truck in a Walmart parking lot. My neck was stiff and I smelled like wet dog. But I had a plan. I went to a coffee shop, used their Wi-Fi, and logged into the county clerk's portal. I had 90 days from the completion of work to file the lien. Brenda kicking me out yesterday? That was technically my last day on the job. The clock had just started. I spent 3 hours drafting the affidavit. I attached every timesheet, every receipt, every change order. Total claim amount, $685,000. That was a lowball estimate. That was just friends and family rates. If I charged her my current market rate, it would be over $1 million. But I wanted to be reasonable. I printed the documents. Then I drove to the county recorder's office. The clerk, a nice lady named Sharon, who I'd seen 50 times while pulling permits for the house, looked at me with concern. "Rough night, Maya?" she asked, eyeing my wrinkled clothes. "You could say that," I said, sliding the stack of papers under the glass. "I need to record a claim of lien against the Rosewood estate, owner of record, the estate of Thomas Vance." Sharon's eyes went wide. She looked at the papers. She saw the amount. "Honey," she whispered, "this is going to stop the title transfer cold." "That's the point, Sharon. That's exactly the point." She stamped it. Clack, clack. Recorded. I walked out of the courthouse feeling 10 pounds lighter, but I wasn't done. Brenda wanted to sell to a developer. That meant she needed a clear title. She wouldn't know about the lien until the title company ran a search, which could be weeks. I needed to speed things up. I needed to make sure she couldn't even get the inspection done. I pulled out my phone and called my buddy Dave. Dave runs the local building inspector's office. "Hey Dave, it's Maya. You know how we have that open permit for the electrical upgrade in the East Wing?" "Yeah." "Well, I've been terminated from the project, which means there is currently no licensed general contractor overseeing the site, and I'm pretty sure the new owners are letting unauthorized people walk through the construction zones." Dave sighed. "I see where this is going. You want me to pull the certificate of occupancy?" "I'm just concerned about safety, Dave. The railing on the balcony isn't bolted down yet. If a developer leans on it..." "I'll be there in an hour," Dave said. "I'll slap a red tag on the front door. Stop work order. Unsafe structure. Nobody goes in or out with a licensed pro." "Thanks, Dave." I hung up. Brenda thought she had kicked me out, but she didn't realize that I was the house. I knew where the bodies were buried. Figuratively, and literally if you count the septic tank I installed. I drove back towards the estate, parking on the public road just out of sight. I wanted to watch. Around noon, Dave's city truck pulled up. He walked up to the front door. Brenda answered, wearing a silk robe, looking annoyed. I couldn't hear what they said, but I saw the body language. Brenda pointed at the driveway, screaming. Dave standing calm, holding a clipboard. Then Dave took out a roll of bright orange tape. He taped a massive red placard to the beautiful oak door. Condemned. Stop work. Brenda looked like she was going to explode. I reclined my seat and ate a cold bagel. Your move, wicked stepmother. But I knew Brenda. She wouldn't fold that easily. She was about to play dirty. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tiffany. Tiffany. OMG, did you call the city? Mom is freaking out. She says she's going to sue you for harassment. Also, she's throwing your tools in the dumpster. Come get them now or they go to the landfill. My blood gold cold. My tools. My grandfather's hand plane was in the garage. My high-end laser levels. Thousands of dollars of equipment. I started the truck. I wasn't going there to negotiate. I was going there to war. They say that a house is just wood and stone. But I know better. A house has a memory. It remembers who loved it, who healed it, and who hurt it. When I pulled up to the Rosewood estate, the house looked angry. The windows were dark. The stop work order was glowing neon orange on the front door. And in the driveway, my stepmother Brenda was trying to throw my livelihood into a rented dumpster. She was holding my grandfather's antique hand plane, a tool from the 1940s that was worth more than her entire wardrobe. She raised it over her head, ready to smash it into the steel rim of the trash container. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just parked my truck, blocking her exit, and stepped out. I wasn't the scared daughter anymore. I was the plaintiff. Go ahead, Brenda, I said, my voice cutting through the damp air. Throw it. That creates a nice documented timeline for the destruction of property lawsuit. She froze. Tiffany, standing nearby with her phone, zoomed in on my face. She's trespassing, Tiffany yelled for her followers. Actually, I said, pointing to the police cruiser pulling up behind me, I'm recovering stolen assets, and you two are currently violating a federal foreclosure notice. Brenda dropped the hand plane. It landed in the mud with a dull thud. She looked at the cop, then at me, then at the red tag on the door. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. She thought eviction was the end of the story. She didn't realize it was just the opening statement. If you want to see exactly how a mechanic's lien can take down a greedy relative, make sure you're subscribed. You do not want to miss the legal smackdown that happens next. Chapter 7: The Dumpster War. The police officer, a veteran named Sergeant Miller who knew my dad, stepped out of his cruiser. He looked tired. He looked at the dumpster, then at Brenda. "Ma'am," Sergeant Miller said, hitching up his belt, "why are you throwing construction equipment away?" "It's trash," Brenda shrieked. "She left it here. It's abandoned property. I have the right to clear my land." "I was evicted 48 hours ago, officer," I said calmly, handing him a binder. "State law gives a tenant 30 days to collect professional property. Furthermore, these are licensed trade tools. That laser level she just cracked, that's $1,200. Miller looked at the shattered level on the ground. He looked at Brenda. "That's destruction of property over $500, Mrs. Vance. That's a felony." Brenda turned pale. I didn't break it. It fell." "I have it on video," I said, pointing to Tiffany. "Her daughter was live streaming it." Tiffany quickly lowered her phone, looking like a deer in headlights. "Here is what is going to happen," Sergeant Miller said. Aya is going to load her truck. You are going to stand on the porch and be quiet. If you touch one more tool, you're going in the back of the squad car. For the next 2 hours, Aya loaded her truck in silence. Brenda watched from the porch, seething. But I wasn't just loading tools. I was observing. The house looked sick. Without the heating system on, which I had shut down remotely via the smart home app before she changed the passwords, the humidity was already rising. I could see condensation on the inside of the restored sash windows. The gutters, which I was supposed to clean that week, were overflowing from the storm, sending water cascading down the newly pointed brickwork. "You're ruining it," I said to Brenda as I threw the last bag of cement into my truck. "The basement sump pump needs to be reset. If you don't do it, the cellar will flood." "I don't need your advice," she spat. "I have a developer coming tomorrow. He's buying it as is. I'll be rich and you'll be nothing." I smiled. A cold, hard smile. "Good luck with the title search, Brenda." I drove away. I had my tools. Now, I just had to wait for the bomb to go off. The bomb detonated 3 days later. I was staying at a cheap motel on the edge of town, organizing my legal files. My phone rang. It wasn't Brenda. It was Mr. Henderson, the family attorney. "Maya?" He sounded stressed. "I just got a very angry call from Brenda's real estate agent. Apparently, the sale to the developer has hit a snag." "Oh," I asked, sipping my bad motel coffee. "What kind of snag?" "The title is clouded," Henderson said, "heavily. There is a mechanic's lien recorded against the deed for nearly $700,000, plus a lis pendens, a notice of pending litigation." "That sounds serious," I said. "Maya?" Henderson's voice dropped. "Did you file this?" "I filed a claim for unpaid labor and materials authorized under the State Construction Act," I recited. "Dad and I had a verbal contract. I have the timesheets. I have the invoices. The estate owes me for the restoration." "Jesus, Maya," Henderson breathed. "You know this kills the sale, right? No developer will touch a property with a lien that size. The bank won't issue a mortgage." "I know," I said. "Tell Brenda that if she wants to sell, she has to satisfy the lien first. She can write me a check for $685,000 today, and I'll release the title." "She doesn't have that kind of money," said Henderson. "The estate is asset rich, but cash poor. Thomas spent everything on the renovation." "Then she can't sell. And since the lien is accumulating interest at 10% per annum, she better figure something out fast." I hung up. The siege had begun. Over the next month, the Rosewood estate began to die. I knew it would. Dad and I had restored it, but old houses are like living organisms. They need constant care. They need to breathe. Brenda, in her arrogance, had fired the groundskeeper to save money. She ignored the red tag from the city and tried to sneak private tours in for cash buyers. But the house knew. First, the boiler went. I heard about it from Dave, my inspector friend. "She called a repairman," Dave told me over lunch, "but because the permit is pulled and the red tag is up, no licensed plumber would go near it. They don't want to lose their license working on a condemned site." So, the house went cold in November. Then, the roof leak in the West Wing returned. We had a temporary patch up there that needed to be sealed before winter. I was going to do it the day after I got evicted. It didn't get done. The first snowmelt soaked through the third-floor ceiling, ruining the plaster medallion in the ballroom. Brenda was living in a freezing, leaking mansion that she couldn't sell and couldn't fix. She tried to sue me. She filed a motion to have the lien removed as frivolous. We went to court. It was a preliminary hearing. Brenda showed up in a fur coat, trying to charm the judge. "Your Honor," she whined, "my stepdaughter is just bitter. She's trying to extort me. She lived there for free. That was her payment." My lawyer, a sharp woman named Sarah, who specialized in construction law, stood up. She laid out the binder. 12,500 hours, the bank loan documents listing me as the general contractor, the invoices for materials paid from my personal checking account. "Your Honor," Sarah said, "this isn't a family dispute. This is a commercial transaction. Mr. Vance hired a contractor. He died before paying the final invoice. The estate is liable." The judge looked at the paperwork. He looked at the lien. "Motion to dismiss denied. The lien stands. The plaintiff has shown sufficient evidence of a valid debt. Proceed to trial." Brenda stormed out of the courtroom. She looked tired. Her hair wasn't as perfect as usual. The stress was eating her alive. Winter turned to spring. The standoff continued. I was working odd jobs, saving money, living quietly. Brenda was drowning. Without the sale money, she couldn't pay the property taxes. The estate tax bill came due, $45,000. She didn't have it. She couldn't pay the electricity for the massive house. The power company threatened to cut her off. And then I played my ace. In a mechanics lien case, if the debt isn't paid within a certain time frame, the contractor has the right to force a sale. I filed for foreclosure on the lien. This wasn't the bank taking the house. This was me taking the house. Brenda received the notice on a Monday. She called me on Tuesday. "Maya," she said. Her voice was small, broken. "Please." "Please what, Brenda?" "Stop this. Let me sell it. I'll give you half. I'll give you half of the sale price." "No," I said. "Why are you doing this?" she screamed, her facade cracking. "It's just a house. You're ruining my life over a house." "It's not just a house," I said. "It's my dad's life. It's my life, and you treated it like a piggy bank. You disrespected the work. You disrespected him." "I'll give you the whole thing," she sobbed. "Just take the lien off so I don't go bankrupt. If you foreclose, I get nothing. I'll be on the street." "You have 24 hours to vacate," I said, echoing her words from 6 months ago, "or I call the sheriff." I hung up. The foreclosure auction was a formality because the lien amount, $685,000, and the house was currently condemned and in disrepair. No other investors showed up. Why would they buy a money pit with complex legal issues? I showed up with my lawyer. I made a credit bid. Basically, I bid the amount Brenda owed me. I didn't have to pay cash. I paid with the debt. "Going once," the auctioneer droned. "Going twice. Sold to the plaintiff for the amount of the lien." The gavel hit the wood. Bang. I owned Rosewood. I owned the land, the house, the vintage tub in the garage, even the furniture inside, since the estate had no cash to pay the legal fees and I absorbed the contents as part of the settlement. I walked out of the county building. The sun was shining. I got into my beat-up truck. "Let's go home," I whispered. Chapter 12, The Return. Driving up the driveway this time felt different. The briars had grown back a bit. The paint was peeling on the fence. The house looked sad, neglected. I parked in front. There was no Brenda, no Tiffany. They had left the night before. I walked up to the front door. The orange condemned sticker was still there, peeling in the sun. I reached into my pocket. I still had my copy of the keys. I never gave her all of them. I unlocked the deadbolt. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Stale air, dust, a hint of mildew. But underneath that, the smell of old oak and beeswax, the smell of home. I walked into the foyer. It was a mess. Brenda had clearly left in a hurry. There were trash bags in the hallway, a broken vase on the floor. I walked into the kitchen. On the counter sat a bottle of cheap wine and a note. "Take your rot. I hope it falls down on top of you." I crumbled the note and threw it in the trash. I walked through the house, room by room. I checked the boiler. It was rusted, but fixable. I checked the roof. The leak was bad, but the beams were solid. I walked into the ballroom. The plaster medallion was ruined, crumbling on the floor. I knelt down and picked up a piece of the plaster. I crumbled it in my hand. "It's okay," I whispered to the room. "I'm back. We can fix this." I wasn't daunted by the work. I wasn't afraid of the repairs. This was what I did. This was who I was. I went out to the truck and got my tool belt. I strapped it on. The weight of the hammer on my hip felt like an anchor, grounding me. I walked to the front door and scraped off the condemned sticker. I pulled out my phone and called Dave. "Hey, Dave. It's Maya." "Maya, heard you bought the place back. Congratulations." "Thanks. I'm ready to pull the permits again. I need to reactivate the electrical and plumbing inspections." "You got it. When do you want to start?" I looked around at the grand, dusty staircase. I looked at the spot where Dad used to stand, drinking his coffee, dreaming of the grand opening. "Today," I said. "We start today." Chapter 13, The Legacy. 6 months later. The video starts with a drone shot of the Rosewood estate. It is gleaming. The gardens are in full bloom. The windows are sparkling. Narrator. It took 6 months of 18-hour days. It took every dime of the small business loan I qualified for, but we did it. The camera cuts to the front porch. A sign hangs above the door. The Vance House, Est 1920, restored 2024. I hosted the grand opening last weekend. The town came out, the mayor cut the ribbon, even Mr. Henderson came, wiping a tear from his eye. Brenda? I heard she moved to a condo in Florida. The last I heard, she was suing the developer who backed out of the deal, trying to scrape together some cash. Tiffany tried to leave a bad review on Yelp, claiming the house was haunted and smelly. I replied to the review with a screenshot of the foreclosure notice. She deleted her account. I walked through the finished ballroom. The chandelier was lit. The floor was polished to a mirror shine. I have a framed photo of my dad on the mantelpiece. He's wearing his hard hat, giving a thumbs up. I poured 2 glasses of scotch. I put one next to his picture. I took a sip of the other. "We did it, Dad. Partner." The house creaked. A warm, settling sound, like a sigh of relief. I walked out onto the balcony. I looked over the 10 acres of land that I now owned, free and clear. I wasn't just a contractor anymore. I wasn't just a daughter. I was the lady of the manor. And if anyone ever tries to take this from me again, well, I've got a backhoe in the shed and 10 acres of soft soil. I'm kidding, mostly. The truth is, you can't steal someone's hard work. You can steal the object, but you can't steal the skill. You can't steal the grit. Brenda wanted the gold, but she didn't know how to mine it. I built this mine, and I'm the only one who knows how to run it. You know that sound a house makes when it's settling? That soft, comforting creak? That wasn't the sound I heard when I walked into my home after a 3-week business trip. The sound I heard was a scream. Not a human scream, a structural one. It was the sound of 100-year-old timber splintering under weight it was never designed to hold. I stood in my foyer, dropping my suitcase, staring through a cloud of white dust. My sister-in-law, Tara, was standing in the middle of what used to be my living room. She was covered in plaster, holding a reciprocating saw, and grinning like she had just won a prize. "Surprise!" she squealed, gesturing to the devastation around her. "I opened up the floor plan. Now the baby will have so much room to crawl." I looked up. The ceiling was bowing. The main support beam, the spine of the entire house, was gone. She hadn't just renovated my house, she had murdered it. And she had no idea that the roof was about to come down on top of us. If you've ever had a family member who doesn't understand the word no, or if you just love watching entitled people face the consequences of their own stupidity, go ahead and like this video. It helps me share this nightmare so you don't have to live it. My name is Elena. I'm 32, and I am a structural engineer. That detail is important. I don't just look at houses, I look at the bones, the veins, the muscles that hold a building together. For the last 5 years, I have lived and breathed one project, the Hawthorne House. It was a Victorian Queen Anne built in 1895. When I bought it, it was a wreck. The roof leaked, the foundation was cracking, and it smelled like 60 years of damp carpet. My family thought I was insane. My mother-in-law, Barbara, actually laughed at the closing dinner. "Elena, why would you buy that dusty old death trap? You could have bought a nice new build in the suburbs, closer to us." "Because it has a soul, Barbara," I had said, trying to be polite, "and because I can fix it." And I did. For 5 years, every spare dollar and every spare hour went into that house. I didn't hire contractors for the detail work. I did it myself. I stripped 7 layers of paint off the original pocket doors to reveal the tiger oak underneath. I restored the stained glass transom windows with a toothbrush and specialized solution. I reinforced the foundation with steel beams that cost more than my car. This house wasn't just property. It was my resume. It was my sanctuary. It was the physical manifestation of my independence. My husband, Mark, is a good man, but he's soft. He loves me, but he's terrified of his family, specifically his sister, Tara. Tara is the golden child. She's 35, has 3 kids with a 4th on the way, and has never heard the word no in her entire life. In Barbara's eyes, Tara is a saint because she provided the grandbabies. I, the career-focused engineer with no children, am simply the help. Tara has always been jealous of my house, not because she likes Victorian architecture, she thinks it's creepy, but because it's big. It's 3,500 square feet of restored glory near the city center. Tara lives in a cramped 3-bedroom townhouse 40 minutes away. Every Thanksgiving, she would make comments. "Must be nice to have so much empty space," she'd say, bouncing a toddler on her hip as she eyed my library. "This room alone is bigger than my kid's shared bedroom. Seems like a waste for just 2 people." "It's not a waste, Tara," I'd say, clutching my wine glass. "It's my office." "Right, your office," she'd sneer. "Well, if you ever decide to get real priorities, let me know. This would make a great playroom." I should have known she wasn't joking. I should have seen the greed in her eyes, but I never imagined she would actually act on it. 3 weeks ago, I got the opportunity of a lifetime. My firm won a contract to consult on a skyscraper in Tokyo. I had to be on site for 20 days. Mark couldn't come. He had to stay back for his accounting job. But as luck would have it, 2 days before I left, Mark got called away for a family emergency on his dad's side in Florida. He had to leave for a week. That meant the house would be empty for at least 7 days. I was paranoid. I admit it. I'm protective of my space. Before I left for the airport, I went through my mental checklist. Windows locked? Yes. Security system armed? Yes. Smart thermostat set to eco mode? Yes. I turned to Mark. Do not give the alarm code to anyone. Not your mom, not Tara, nobody. "I know, Elena," he said, kissing my forehead. "I'm not an idiot. The house is locked down. Go to Tokyo, kill it." I left with a weird pit in my stomach. You know that instinct, that primal alarm bell when you leave your cave unguarded? I ignored it. I told myself I was being anxious. I had a great trip. Tokyo was incredible. I was working 14-hour days, so I wasn't checking my phone much. Mark and I texted, but he was busy dealing with the funeral arrangements in Florida, so our communication was sporadic. He returned home 5 days before me. He sent me a text, "Home safe, house looks great, miss you." That was a lie. Or maybe he just didn't look hard enough. Or maybe, just maybe, he was too scared to tell me the truth while I was on a 12-hour flight. My flight landed at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was exhausted, jet-lagged. All I wanted was a hot bath in my clawboat tub and a glass of wine in my silent, beautiful library. I took an Uber from the airport because Mark was at work, and as the car turned onto my street, a historic district lined with sycamore trees, I felt that swell of pride I always feel. Then the car pulled up to number 42. My heart stopped. There was a skip container in my driveway, a massive yellow industrial dumpster, and it was full. I saw jagged pieces of wood sticking out of it, dark, stained wood. My wainscoting? "Is this the place?" the Uber driver asked. I didn't answer. I threw the door open and sprinted up the walkway. The first thing I noticed was the door. My front door was original 1895 mahogany. I had spent 3 months sanding and restaining it by hand. It was a masterpiece of woodwork. It was gone. In its place was a generic, pre-hung fiberglass door from a big box store, and it was painted pastel yellow. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped my keys. I tried to put my key in the lock, but of course it didn't fit. The lock had been changed. I pounded on the door. "Mark! Mark!" No answer. I ran to the side of the house, to the bay window that looks into the dining room. I peered through the glass. My knees buckled. The dining room was gone. The wall separating the dining room from the kitchen, a wall that contained the original butler's pantry cabinets, was demolished. It was just open space. But it wasn't just a wall. I froze, pressing my face against the cold glass. That wall was a load-bearing partition. It held up the master bedroom floor joists. I looked up at the ceiling inside. Even from the window, I could see the sag. The plaster was cracking in a spiderweb pattern spreading from the center of the room. The house wasn't just ugly, it was dying. I didn't wait. I grabbed a brick from the garden edging, an antique brick I had salvaged from a demolition site, and I went back to the front door. I smashed the glass pane next to the handle. I reached in, unlocked the deadbolt, and threw the door open. The smell hit me instantly. Sawdust, cheap latex paint, and diaper genie? "Mark!" I screamed, stepping into the foyer. "Excuse me?" a voice shrieked from the kitchen area. "You can't just break into people's houses." Tara walked out. She was wearing maternity leggings and a mama bear t-shirt. She was covered in white dust. She was holding a sanding block. She stopped when she saw me. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. "Elena, you're back early," she said, wiping her forehead. "You're letting all the cool air out. Close the door." I stood there, vibrating with a rage so pure it felt like a white light in my brain. Where is my mahogany door? What? Where is my mahogany door? Tara rolled her eyes. "Oh, that old thing. It was so dark and depressing. It didn't vibe with the modern farmhouse aesthetic I'm going for. The guys took it to the dump." "The dump?" I repeated. My voice sounded hollow. "Yes. Look, Elena, don't be dramatic. We're doing you a favor. This place was a dungeon. We're brightening it up, making it family-friendly." I walked past her, pushing her aside. I walked into the main living area. It was worse than I thought. The layout was unrecognizable. My library, my beautiful library with the floor-to-ceiling built-ins, was painted baby boy blue. The books were gone, boxed up, thrown away. I didn't know. The fireplace mantel, a hand-carved marble piece from Italy, had been painted over with white chalk paint. But the kitchen was the crime scene. The wall was gone. The studs had been sawed through. And in the middle of the room, standing right where the support posts should have been, was a kitchen island. A cheap particle board island that wasn't even anchored to the floor. "Tara," I said, my voice trembling, "who cut these studs? Who removed this wall?" "I did," she said proudly. "Well, me and my cousin seeking work, Ricky, he's handy. We watched a few tutorials. It's called Open Concept, Elena. You should thank me. It adds value." I looked at the ceiling again. The crack was wider now. I could hear a low groan coming from the wood above us. The floor joists of the second story were currently spanning 20 feet without support. They were sagging at least 3 inches. "Tara," I said, turning to her slowly, "get out." "Excuse me?" "Get out of my house, now." "It's not your house anymore," she yelled, crossing her arms over her chest. "Mom said we could have it. You're never here, you're always traveling, and I need space for the baby. Mark said we could stay for a few days, and Mom said possession is 9/10 of the law." I laughed, a manic, terrifying laugh. "Mark said you could stay? Did Mark say you could remove a load-bearing wall and collapse the second floor?" "You're just jealous," she yelled. "You're jealous because I'm a mother and you're just a worker. This is a family home now. We need the space. You can live in the townhouse." "This house is about to collapse," I screamed back. "You idiot. You cut the main support beam. The master bathtub is directly above us. It weighs 400 pounds. If that floor gives way, the tub is going to fall through the ceiling and crush you." Tara scoffed. "You're lying. You're just trying to scare me. It's solid wood. It's fine." Creak. The sound was loud, like a gunshot in a canyon. Dust trickled down from the ceiling crack, landing right on Tara's nose. She froze. "Does that sound fine to you?" I pulled my phone out and dialed 911. "I need police and the fire department at 42 Hawthorne Lane. Structural emergency. Imminent collapse risk. There are squatters in the building refusing to leave." Tara's eyes went wide. "You're calling the cops on me? I'm pregnant, you psycho!" She pulled out her phone and started frantically dialing. Mom, Alina is here and she's threatening me. She's trying to kick me out into the street." I ignored her. I walked to the front door, the hideous yellow one, and propped it open. "I am going to stand in the yard," I said calmly. "If you want to die under a pile of plaster and cast iron, stay here. If you have half a brain cell, you will get out." I walked out. 2 minutes later, Tara stomped out, dragging a suitcase, screaming into her phone. 5 minutes later, Mark's car screeched into the driveway. He jumped out, looking pale. He saw me. He saw Tara. He saw the skip full of my house's history. "Elena," he gasped, running to me. I can explain." I held up a hand. "Don't." "Mom told me Tara just needed a place to crash for a few days while her townhouse was being fumigated," Mark stammered. I didn't know she was doing this." "You gave her the code," I said. It wasn't a question. "Mom made me. She said it was an emergency." "And you didn't check on the house? You've been back for 5 days, Mark." Mark looked down at his shoes. "I came by once. She changed the locks. She wouldn't let me in. She said she was nesting and didn't want men around. I didn't want to cause a scene with Mom." "So you let her steal our house," I said coldly, "because you're afraid of your mother." Before he could answer, a fire marshal truck and a police cruiser pulled up. The fire marshal, a big guy named Captain Miller, walked up. I knew him. I had consulted with the department on code compliance for other buildings. "Elena?" he asked, looking confused. "What's going on? Dispatch said imminent collapse." "Captain," I pointed at the open door, My sister-in-law removed the central load-bearing partition between the kitchen and dining room. Span is roughly 22 feet. No LVL beam installed. No temporary shoring, just air. Captain Miller's face went pale. He looked at the house. He looked at Tara, who was currently yelling at the police officer that this was a civil matter. Jesus, Miller muttered. He turned to his men. Do not enter. I repeat, do not enter. Get the laser measure. Check the exterior plumb line. He walked cautiously to the threshold, not stepping inside. He looked up at the ceiling. He shone his flashlight. He stepped back quickly. Yeah, he said, turning to me. That's coming down. The deflection is already visible from here. We need to red tag the structure immediately. Condemn it until it's shored up. Nobody goes inside. Not for clothes, not for toothbrushes, nothing. Tara heard this. She stopped screaming at the cop and marched over to the fire marshal. Excuse me, you can't condemn my house. I have a nursery to finish. My gender reveal party is on Saturday. Captain Miller looked at her like she was a bug. Ma'am, if you walk into that house, you will likely be dead by Saturday. I am placing a condemned notice on the store. Entering is a criminal offense. Tara turned to me, her face purple with rage. Fix it, Tara screamed. You're an engineer. Fix it right now so I can go back inside. I can't fix it, Tara, I said, my voice dead calm. You destroyed the structural integrity of a historic landmark. You caused roughly, I'm guessing, $200,000 in damage, maybe more if the roof caves in tonight. I don't have money, she shrieked. Mom said you would pay for it. You're rich. Just then, another car pulled up, a Lexus. My mother-in-law, Barbara, stepped out. She didn't look at the house. She didn't look at the fire marshal. She walked straight to Mark. Mark Anthony, she boomed. Tell your wife to stop this nonsense immediately. Tara needs to rest. Unlock the door and send these policemen away. Mark looked at his mother. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at the yellow condemnation sticker Captain Miller was currently slapping onto the doorframe. The house gave another loud, agonizing groan. A shingle popped off the roof and slid down near Barbara's feet. The house is literally cracking in half as we speak. I wish I was joking. Physics doesn't care if you are pregnant. Physics doesn't care if it's your dream nursery. And physics certainly doesn't care if your mother thinks she runs the world. Gravity is the only law that cannot be broken. 10 minutes after the fire marshal condemned my home, I stood on the sidewalk and watched my life's work surrender to gravity. My sister-in-law, Tara, was still screaming about her gender reveal party when the sound started. It wasn't a creak this time. It was a snap, like a gunshot. Then came the crash. The second floor, specifically the master bathroom with its 400-pound cast iron clawfoot tub, decided it had had enough. It punched through the weakened floor joists, smashed through the open-concept kitchen ceiling, and obliterated the cheap island Tara had installed. The dust cloud billowed out of the broken front door like smoke from a cannon. And in the silence that followed, my mother-in-law, Barbara, finally stopped talking. She looked at the dust, then looked at me, and said the most insane thing I have ever heard in my life. If you want to see exactly how much a historic restoration costs and how I made sure Tara paid for every single splinter, hit that subscribe button. The legal battle was even uglier than the collapse. Chapter 6, The Crash and the Delusion. Let's rewind 5 minutes before the tub fell. The scene on my front lawn was a circus. The fire marshal, Captain Miller, was trying to tape off the perimeter. Tara was hysterical, trying to push past a police officer to get back inside. My decorations, she shrieked. My balloons are in there. I spent $500 on a custom balloon arch. Step back, ma'am, the officer barked. Barbara, my mother-in-law, was in full manager mode. She marched up to Captain Miller. "Now listen here," she said, pointing a manicured finger at his chest. "You are overreacting. It's just an old house. Houses make noises. My son Mark will go inside and put a stick, a prop, under the ceiling. It will be fine for the party on Saturday. Then Elena can fix it properly next week." I looked at Mark, my husband, the man I had shared a mortgage with for 6 years. "Mark," I said, my voice was dangerously quiet, "tell her." "Mom, it's pretty bad. The wall is gone." "Oh, stop it," Barbara scoffed. "You millennials are so fragile. Elena, give me the keys. I'm going in to get Tara's things." "Barbara, if you cross that tape, you will be arrested. And if you go inside, you will die." "Don't be dramatic," she sneered. She took a step toward the porch. Crack. It started as a low rumble deep in the belly of the house. The windows vibrated. Barbara froze, 1 foot on the walkway. Then came the snap. It sounded like a tree breaking in a storm, but louder, sharper. It was the sound of 120-year-old heart pine joists shearing under sheer force. "Get back!" Captain Miller roared, tackling Barbara away from the porch. We watched in horror. The bay window on the first floor blew out. Shards of antique glass sprayed onto the rose bushes. Through the broken window, we saw the ceiling descend. It didn't fall flat, it folded like a V. Boom! The impact shook the ground under our feet. The sound of porcelain shattering, wood splintering, and pipes bursting created a cacophony of destruction. A plume of white drywall dust and gray plaster dust exploded out of the front door and the broken windows. Then the hissing started, the sound of water spraying at high pressure. "The main line," I whispered. "The plumbing for the tub sheared off." Captain Miller was already on his radio. "Dispatch, we have a partial structural collapse at 42 Hawthorne. Water main breach, need utilities shut off immediately." I stood there, feeling nothing. I was numb. My brain couldn't process the grief yet, so it switched to engineer mode. Load path failed. Point load of the tub exceeded the capacity of the remaining joists. Tensile failure. Catastrophic. Barbara, currently sitting on the grass where the fire marshal had tackled her, coughed through the dust. She looked at the ruin of my home, then looked at me and said the most insane thing I have ever heard in my life. "Well," she said, brushing dirt off her blazer, "I hope you're happy, Elena. You've ruined the surprise." I stared at her. "You ruined the surprise?" "Yes, if you hadn't come home early and caused a scene, the house wouldn't have been stressed. You brought all this negative energy." I looked at the police officer. "Official, I'd like to file a report for criminal destruction of property, and I want them off my land." The next 48 hours were a blur of hotels, lawyers, and insurance adjusters. I checked into a residence inn. Mark tried to come with me. I stopped him at the door of the hotel room. "No," I said. "Elena, please," he cried. "I didn't know she was going to cut the beams, I swear. I just thought she was painting." "You gave her the keys, Mark. You let the fox into the henhouse because you were too scared to tell your mommy no. You are an accessory to this." "Where am I supposed to go?" "Go to your mother's," I said, slamming the door. "She has plenty of room now that she doesn't have a gender reveal to plan." The next morning, I met the insurance adjuster, a sharp woman named Karen, at the site. The house was red-tagged. We had to wear hard hats just to stand in the yard. Karen took photos of the skip container. She took photos of the open concept disaster visible through the window. She took photos of the pile of debris that used to be my kitchen. "So," Karen said, scribbling in her notebook, Unpermitted renovation? I didn't do it, I said quickly. I was in Tokyo. I have flight records. My sister-in-law broke in and did this without my consent. Karen stopped writing. She looked at me over her glasses. Did she have a key? I hesitated. My husband, Mark, gave her a key for emergency access. Karen sighed. She closed her notebook. The sound was final. Elena, I'm going to be honest with you. This is a problem. Since a key was given, this isn't breaking and entering in the eyes of the policy initially. It's permission granted. And since the damage was caused by a family member doing intentional renovation work, even if it was bad work, most policies have a strict exclusion for faulty workmanship and intentional acts by invitees. My stomach dropped. Are you saying I'm not covered? I'm saying the structural collapse caused by unpermitted removal of a load-bearing wall is not an accident like a fire or a storm. It's negligence. Unless you can prove criminal malicious intent, the insurance company is going to deny this claim. You're looking at a total loss out of pocket. I felt like I was going to throw up. How much? I asked, to fix it. Karen looked at the house. You need a structural engineer, which you are, so you know. You need to shore up the roof, jack up the second floor, replace the joists, rebuild the load-bearing wall, redo the plumbing, electrical, HVAC, and that's just the rough work. Then you have the restoration of the historic finishes. She paused. Conservatively, $350,000, maybe $4. I didn't have $400,000. I had a mortgage and a pile of rubble. Okay, I said, wiping a tear from my cheek. If insurance won't pay, Tara will. Chapter 8, The War Room. I hired the nastiest, most aggressive property litigation attorney in the state. His name was Saul, and he looked like a bulldog in a cheap suit, but he was brilliant. I sat in his office, laying out the evidence. The Ring doorbell footage, recovered from the cloud, showing Tara and her cousin Ricky carrying in sledgehammers. The text messages from Mark admitting he gave the key under duress. The voicemail from Tara admitting she opened up the floor plan. The fire marshal's report stating the cause of collapse was unauthorized removal of structural members. So, Saul said, tapping the desk, here's the strategy. We can't just sue Tara. She is a stay-at-home mom with zero income. She's judgment-proof, meaning even if we win, she has no money to pay you. So I'm screwed? No, Saul grinned. We sue everyone. We sued Tara for destruction of property. We sue cousin Ricky for performing unlicensed contracting work, which is a felony when damages exceed $1,000. We sue your husband, Mark, for facilitating the negligence, mostly to scare him. And most importantly, we sue Barbara. Barbara? Barbara owns the townhouse Tara lives in. Barbara has assets, and since Barbara was on site directing the renovation, we have witness testimony from the neighbors that she was there telling them what to do. We can argue that she was the general contractor of this illegal project. Do it, I said. Burn them down. Do it, I said. Burn them down. Chapter 9, The Family Meeting. 3 days later, I got a text from Mark. Please meet us at Mom's house. We need to settle this as a family. No lawyers. I forwarded the text to Saul. Saul replied, go, record everything, agree to nothing. I walked into Barbara's pristine, sterile suburban living room. Tara was there, crying on the sofa, clutching her belly. Barbara was pacing. Mark was sitting in a corner, head in his hands. Elena, Barbara started, her voice sickeningly sweet, thank you for coming. We've been so worried about you. Cut the crap, Barbara, I said, remaining standing. My house has a hole in it. What is the plan? Well, Barbara said, clasping her hands, Tara is very sorry. It was a misunderstanding. She watched some HGTV and got carried away. It's the pregnancy hormones. She wasn't thinking clearly. Hormones didn't make her rent a reciprocating saw, I said. We want to offer you a settlement, Barbara said. She pulled out a checkbook. I am willing to write you a check right now for $5,000. That should cover the cleanup and some drywall. I stared at her. I actually laughed. 5,000? It's generous, Tara sniffled. It's just some wood, Elena. You can fix it yourself. You're an engineer. The estimate is $400,000, I said calmly. The room went silent. You are insane, Tara whispered. You're trying to scam us. I have the quotes, I said, and since insurance denied the claim because you committed an intentional tort, that money has to come from somewhere. We don't have that kind of money, Barbara shrieked. Then you shouldn't have destroyed my house. I pulled a folder out of my bag. I wasn't going to give these to you yet, but since you insulted me with that $5,000 check, I tossed the legal papers onto the coffee table. You've been served, all of you. Civil suit for damages, emotional distress, and loss of use. And cousin Ricky, the police are picking him up tonight for felony unlicensed contracting. Tara picked up the papers. Her hands were shaking. You're suing me? I'm your sister. I'm carrying your niece. You're not your sister, I said cold. You're a squatter who destroyed my life. And Mark, I looked at my husband. If you don't testify truthfully about what happened, if you try to protect them, I will divorce you and I will take half of your 401k to pay for the repairs. Mark looked up. He looked at his mother, who was purple with rage. He looked at his sister, who was wailing. Mark stammered. Choose, Mark, right now. Them or me? Mark stood up. He took a deep breath. Mom, he said, you told me it was just painting. You lied to me. I did no such thing, Barbara gasped. You did, Mark said, his voice gaining strength. And Tara, you knew Elena told you not to touch the walls. You did it out of spite. How dare you, Tara screamed. Mark walked over to me. He stood next to me. I'm going with my wife, and I'm going to tell the truth in the deposition. The legal process was brutal. Barbara hired a generic lawyer who tried to argue that the house was already dilapidated and that the collapse was due to pre-existing termite damage. Unfortunately for them, I keep meticulous records. I had an inspection report from 3 months ago showing the structure was sound. I had photos of the pristine joists before I left for Tokyo. But the smoking gun came from an unexpected source. Cousin Ricky. Ricky didn't want to go to jail, so his public defender cut a deal. Ricky provided us with the text messages Tara had sent him. Tara to Ricky. Elena is gone for 3 weeks. I want to knock down the wall between the kitchen and dining room. She hates open concepts, but once it's done, she can't put it back, lol. Ricky. Isn't that wall load-bearing? The house is old. Tara. Who cares? It's just wood. I want it gone. Mom says she'll pay you $500 cash. Just do it before Elena gets back. Sal played these texts on a projector during the mediation hearing. This proves premeditation, Sal said. It proves knowledge of the risk. Isn't that wall load-bearing? And it proves Barbara funded the illegal activity. The mediator looked at Barbara and Tara. Ladies, if this goes to trial, a jury will crucify you. You admitted to knowing it might be load-bearing and doing it anyway because the owner hates open concepts. That is malice. They settled. They had no choice. Barbara had to liquidate her investment portfolio. She took out a second mortgage on her own house. The settlement was for $320,000. It wasn't the full $400K, but it was enough to start. Tara didn't pay a dime, of course. She has no money. But the stress of the lawsuit caused a rift in the family that will never heal. Barbara blames Tara for ruining her retirement. Tara blames Barbara for not protecting her. And the house? It took 8 months. I lived in a rental apartment, paid for by the settlement, while the contractors worked. We had to jack up the entire second floor with steel acro props. It looked like the house was on stilts. We installed a massive steel I-beam. I painted it black and left it exposed as a reminder to span the gap where the wall used to be. I restored the kitchen, but I didn't make it open concept. I rebuilt the wall. I put the butler's pantry back exactly where it was, because it's my house. Mark and I are working on it. He is in intense therapy to learn how to set boundaries with his toxic family. He has gone no contact with Tara and low contact with Barbara. He slept on the couch for 6 months. He's back in the bedroom now, but he knows he is on icy thin. Last week, I finally moved back home. The first thing I did was install a new front door, solid oak, reinforced steel frame, and a biometric lock that only I can open. I was sitting in my library yesterday, painted back to its original deep emerald green, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from a random number. It's Tara. The baby was born, a boy. Thanks for ruining his first year of life. Hope you're happy in your empty house. I looked at the text, I looked at my beautiful, structurally sound ceiling, and I looked at the steel beam that saved my home. I didn't reply. I just blocked the number, took a sip of my wine, and listened to the house. It creaked, softly, comfortingly. It wasn't screaming anymore. It was safe. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe. And let me know in the comments, would you have forgiven Mark? Or would you have served him with divorce papers along with the lawsuit? I read every comment.